faction-focused Sylvaneth 2.0. Not only is this faction focused with the AOS coach, but I have an amazing range of guests, and this is co-brought to you by
Mortally Wounded Podcast. This is episode 27.
And this is our host, Chris Welfare. So Chris from the Mortally Wounded Podcast is the co-host, but more importantly, we have an amazing range of guests. First off, someone who probably needs no introduction, it is Shadowhammer himself. Liam, how are you, sir? Give us the intro.
I'm great. How is everyone? I am Liam, also known as Shadowhammer, also known as Shitstir of Twitter and stuff. Yeah, it's great to be here talking about trees again. So yeah, super excited.
And you've been playing with the trees now for how long?
Since AOS General's Handbook 1, pretty much. So is that like 3 years now, almost, guys? I have 3 years. And it was like my first love army. And every time when I go to a different army, within like 3 months or so, I go back to trees. So yeah, it's like an on and off love with them. It's like that like side chick kind of thing. It's like it's nice to know it's there. So yeah,
you're a tree that will never die, like a cactus.
Sure.
Someone who's not like a cactus because he's sweet like nectar is Laurie from the UK. How are you, Laurie?
Morning. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, I'm Laurie Huggett-Wilde, or Hugh Wigbit, or various other names, whatever you want to call me. I have a stupid surname. I've been playing with trees for similar amount of time, actually. I think since General's Handbook. They're the first army I've picked up. I've dabbled with Daughters of Cain. I've dabbled with Blades of Corn. But similarly, you just can't. You keep on coming back to them. The way they play have got such a unique style that whenever you go away to another army, you just find yourself missing a lot about it. So they are my true love in that respect. They're not a side piece like Shadowhammer. They are my true love through and through. And yeah, I just really enjoy playing them. I'm on Twitter as LHWAOS.
I feel like it might be Liam's, maybe the ex-girlfriend, where you keep kind of drunk calling them at night.
Yeah.
More like that than the side chick. We've also got the sex robot himself, a man who is every single place that ever on the internet. It is Short Shorts, Dan AOS Shorts. How are you, sir?
Good, thank you, mate. I am well. So not a sex robot, just an Englishman stuck down at the end of the world down in New Zealand.
And you've been playing trees for a while as well, haven't you?
Yeah, since the first book dropped. So I sort of took a break from Age of Sigmar. Didn't really get on board at the start, but Sylvaneth was what pulled me in.
And then finally, to close us off, which is Chris Welfare. So Chris, everyone on your podcast obviously knows who you are. For the people who are watching on YouTube, who are you?
Hi, everyone. Chris Welfare, based in Sydney, UK originally, so not quite the bottom of the world, but near to down. But yeah, I've been playing AOS since the very beginning, when it was wounds and no points and everything, and jumped on the trees as soon as they came out as well. So they're probably my main army, to be honest, but I'm always jumping around projects, but they always pull me back. They've probably had the most changes of anything. So I really love them. They're really cool.
Yeah, great. And they're a fantastic army, so much so that I have actually bought a 2,000-point Sylvaneth army, but the book is still unwrapped because Cities of Sigmar got announced. But that's why I have these four legends here to talk us through who is Sylvaneth, what has changed between each book, and talk through about list building, general tactics, customization advice, tactical genius. I think it's going to be quite a robust conversation that I'm sure whether you're new, whether you're old, whether you are someone who picked up Wood Elves back in the day, someone can take something away from this. So guys, are you ready to start?
Yeah, definitely.
Do this.
Awesome. So I'm going to throw the first one to Chris. And the first question is, who are the Sylvaneth? What's the background in AOS? Who is this faction if I've never seen them other than the models?
So the Sylvaneth are the children of Alariel, I think is the narrative tagline. They are half of the race, I guess, is formerly the Wood Elves, the kind of the tree folk, the Dryads, the Tree Lords and that. And then there's the new half, which I guess has been created for Age of Sigmar, which is the Kurnoth. So you've got Kurnoth Hunters, and then you've also got Tree-Revenants and Spite-Revenants, which they brought in, which are kind of half... almost elves, I guess, what kind of would have been wood elves merged with actual tree spirits. So yeah, they're very much children of the forest. They go through different aspects and seasons just like nature does. So you have the winter, the cold aspects, and then they can bloom and flourish in spring and summer. And you have different aspects as well. And Alarielle, as their leader, very much goes through those aspects. And I think right now she's been reborn into her war aspect. So she's leading her armies at the front and marshalling the tree people to war.
Yeah, fantastic. Anyone else got anything to add on that?
I'm just more amazed that Chris knows narrative. So yeah. He never reads the narrative parts. This is amazing. Yeah.
He's well advised and practiced on this.
Interestingly, I couldn't find the part in the narrative with the Phoenix, but yeah.
You have to read between the lines. It is there. If you search for it, it's right there. It's a winter leaf and
part,
frost heart. See? Look at that, eh? Go together so easily.
So, Laurie, while we're chatting along, what attracted you to the army other than having a Frost Phoenix into a Winterleaf? So, what brought you? Yeah, I'm sure your love started well before the Phoenix. What brought you to Sylvaneth?
It is actually is I'm not a very good hobbyist. Like that narrative thing there from Chris. First time I've heard any of that. Sounds fascinating. So for me, I'm not a very good painter. There's a chap called Aaron Bailey, who is a great painter over in the UK, and he took it to my first Age of Sigmar tournament I went to, a little one day down in Weymouth, and I saw his army, and it seemed really easy to paint. That's the honest truth of it. Is I looked at it and thought, actually, I think I could do a job with that army, which I'd be happy with on the table, because you want to have pride in your army. And so I think the thing about Sylvaneth is that they're an army from a hobbyist point of view, which all levels are doable with it. You can do something absolutely stunning, like a top level army, which will win awards, and obviously lots of them have won awards. But there's also one which is really easy to dry brush, really easy to use washes on. Contrast paints seem to be brilliant with them as well. So actually, it wasn't to begin with anything about the play style at all which attracted me to them, but just the fact that I thought I could do a job with painting those. And then once you started playing them, then yeah, actually I think their play style is pretty unique actually. As I'm sure the other fellas would agree, that the way it plays is very different from almost any other army out there. And I really like that. You can really spring surprises. It puts a lot of power in your hands. Don't know if anyone knows that.
Sweet.
Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. That's the attraction for me in the army was that unique ability to move around the board and dictate combats as and when you wanted, and spring surprises on opponents and just play mind games with them all day long. It's a sort of defining feature why I wanted to pick it up. And just one of the things why I love this book so much and keep coming back to it, and to the extent where I pretty much sold all my other AOS armies just to buy more trees, is because this book, I think, more than any other book in Age of Sigmar, has maintained relevance through every single edition of the game. So you've gone from magic heavy, you've gone from movement heavy, you've gone from absolute sort of control Winterleaf type lists. You've got a whole range of different options, and as we'll see with the new book, there's still a variety of different ways to play and different ways to play the meta. So always something to come back to in the trees.
Yeah, for me, it's just the Kurnoth models that got me super attracted to the army. Like, those are the most boss-looking elite thing. Like, there's Varangard, and then there's like Kurnoth Hunters, and I'm pretty sure Kurnoth Hunters, in my opinion, was like, bam, like the sexiest looking models. And then I heard that they're really good in the game in AOS 1 with Naru, where they were like 180 points back in the day.
Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah, and then that's when I had, I think, 15 or 18 in them in AOS 1. And then that was like my go. And Magro looks so disappointed in me. But
I was disappointed when you had 110 Dryads. That's when my heart sank.
That was a great time. I have no idea what you're on about. But yeah, like, I think for me, what attracted me to the army was definitely the models. Like, Durthu looks bowler. And as some people already know, they've probably seen my Snake Durthu. Like, that model is like, just him in character, and like the way his stance, and like his war scroll's really good. So it was just like, it sold me. And then the play style of like playing mind games, and apparently, according to Chris, I'm very manipulative in the game, as he would probably tell you from our games like recently. It's a perfect army for me, and I just keep just perfect. And as also what Dan said, how they always stay relevant within the meta. So when the meta changes, Sylvaneth, give us like a week or less, and we'll figure out a way to like keep up. And I think that's what's really great about the book. So yeah.
Chris, anything
Chris.
you'd want to wrap up with that one?
No, I think the guys have summed it up pretty well. Like in terms of the relevance thing, I think they're the army that feels like it's been updated the most, but it actually hasn't. But it's just that they had so many builds in the book, but lots of them weren't viable with the points at that time. So every single year, the main points changes have happened. It's completely unlocked some of the other builds and made them more kind of viable. At the start, it was kind of Nauru, and then it moved on to Dreadwood and Winterleaf, and then Harvest Boon started to come in, and it's kind of over the last 3 years, there's always been a top tier Sylvaneth build, if not more, and it just that's why it keeps it interesting.
Yeah, I think the one reason why I've picked up a 2,000 point army is the conversions. It's something that I think, if I think about Sylvaneth and trees, there are trees in every part of the mortal realms, and whether you want to have metallic style ones from the realm of metal, whether you want some that are on fire from Shimon, there's so much conversion opportunity. I've seen, death skulls on some from Shaiish, and there's just so much opportunity with this army. I think it's a converter's dream, and I think you guys have all nailed this one on the head. So, Dan, I might throw this one to you. What are some of the strengths of a Sylvaneth force? So, if I was going to buy this army and start playing with them, what can I expect as their strong points in the army?
Well, AOS 1, we would have said the resilience and movement of the army. Now, this is one of the fundamental questions I was hoping that we were going to be able to get into and answer on this show, is what do we look like now? Because you go down and you go, well, are we a magic list? Are we strong magic? No, we don't have any double casters or massive ways to buff. Are we a high movement list? We've got limits on that. Are we a shooting list? Are we a combat list? All of those things have been tweaked and modified with this book. So I think at the moment our strength is sort of adaptability. We've got some strong combat focus, but many combat armies will rinse us if we're not ready for it. So it's a really interesting place. We've got really a bit of everything in the list. And I've been, since the electronic version of the book came out, and we've all sort of been list building and making ideas, and for those of us down in a good time zone to have been awake when it got released, I think I've written a list with every single army, with every single unit in the army and not paying a battalion tax or anything like that. There's legitimately a role for pretty much every unit in the book.
Anyone want to?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think what's really interesting about the new book is you've got the capacity to do anything. You could build yourself, as Dan says, you've got the capacity to do anything, and it's what you do with that. Do you therefore go all in on one area, like Dan Spam Bradshaw's doing this 21 bow hunter list? So that's going on one route. Or do you try to create a bit of everything? Yeah, I mean, that's his name, Dan Spam Bradshaw. Or do you try to create a bit of everything? And that's the problem I've been having with, not the problem, that's the dilemma I've been having with all of the lists I write, is that if you want to do balance, it always feels like you're just lacking it in one area. Like you either give up magic reliably or you give up movement reliably, because now that you can only teleport one unit through the woods, actually, if you go really Kurnoth heavy, then you're only teleporting one of them at a time, which actually is going to limit you in terms of your movement. So that's the real dilemma there, is that you can do anything. Like you could have a really fast moving army, you could take 4 tree lords and they could all teleport together, but then you're lacking in other areas. And that's what's quite nice about it, I think, is you have got a real tough dilemma there and what route you take.
I think our strengths are like we have great battle line. I can't say like anything negative about Battleline. Like we got survivable dryads with -1 to hit, +1 save, and you put them in cover, and you can be like, cool, I wish you all the best of luck. You have tree revs where they can teleport wherever they want, whenever they want, which is like, and they fact that they got like the restriction like taken out from the old book. Now they are like best buck for your buy. And then you have spite revs, which are great to fill in like your minimal battle line thing. Just do 3 things of spites, put them outcasts, and then and they're actually quite good in combat from what I've had against me, and also playing with them. So that's one of our strengths, is we have actually like, you know how most armies, their battle line's like a huge tax, like it's a very much like, oh, I have to take it. with Sylvaneth, you go, cool, my Battleline are actually amazing, so I'm more than happy to take all of this. I think that's a huge strength compared to other armies, because I don't think a lot of armies actually have great Battleline, except for Grots. But like, we actually do have great Battleline options. And yeah, pretty much similar to what Laurie and Dan says, like, we're not great at like one specific thing, but like we can adapt, and that's really important. So yeah, like, I think that's our huge strength.
I will pull out something that Laurie said that he didn't say. Like, he didn't actually specifically call it out. And he was talking about the teleporting piece. And if I'm a new player, I may not quite understand this piece just yet, but you have high movement through some of the abilities through the Wildwoods. So you do get an allegiance terrain piece, which allows you to have some fast movement, which we'll unpack later in today's show. But for some armies that are quite slow, this is not the case for Sylvaneth. And you've got some abilities to summon new models onto the board. So there's, it's almost like the Stormcast, where you've got a whole range of different options. You can be a utility knife and have a little bit of everything, or you can go deep in one particular build. So I think it is definitely an army. You can see why it stood the test of times, just because there's so much flexibility and variety. And it hasn't really been quote unquote nerfed, because it's not crazy overpowered, but it's also not horrible. It's a very good army, in my opinion.
Well, something that you said, Anthony, about our summoning. Like, our summoning is actually probably up there as one of the most like strongest, because our 80-point wizard can summon 100 points for free, like a turn. So like turns 1 to 4, because that's all the time you're going to be summoning, you're summoning 400 points for free from an 80-point wizard, who's actually really hard to kill, because she's make 1 to hit. And then with our Wildwoods also blocking line of sight, like that's a huge strength. Like, shooting armies, we're like their kryptonite. So pretty much, I think that's a huge thing for us, is like our one summoning mechanic. We also got a Larial, but point per point, the branch rate is like pretty much by the end of the game is worth negative like 320 by the end of it. So yeah, like that's probably one other strength that we have.
Chris, what about the weaknesses? Is there any particular weaknesses you'd want to call out as a Sylvaneth player?
Yeah, I mean, the army can feel surprisingly frail if you don't get into the right places. Fundamentally, there is no mortal wound protection in the army at all. So you're relying on artifacts. As much as you might have a lot of 12 wound characters and things like that, they can go down surprisingly quickly. They hate being one shot. There's lots of regrowth mechanics, which I like because it fits kind of with nature. You can whittle something down and then it can come back. But if anything gets one shot by mortal wounds, it can be a real struggle. So you tend to not see particularly high wound count models, armies either, unless you're going the kind of Dryad spam route. But I feel like that's probably a thing of the past. Certainly, or people like Liam have got that out of their system now anyway. So if you're not hugging your trees and you get into the wrong position and you're not utilizing those kind of minuses to hit and things like that on Dryads from being near Wildwoods, and using the line of sight blocking mechanic of the trees to protect your weaker 5 wound heroes and no mortal wound output, you suddenly can find your army getting pulled apart. And if you've lost those support pieces that allow you to kind of regrow things and stuff like that, the army can actually feel quite fragile.
Just to jump on top of that, completely linked to what Chris is saying, you really fear a double turn because you rely so much on healing. Like, you need a turn to heal. So if I found so many games I've lost is because I've got doubled at the wrong time, which was always a problem with the old book, because you always took first turn because you need to get your Wildwoods up. And that's changed a little bit now, but you still fear that double turn. Even things like Alariel, with her 16 wounds, she just dies because she's got nothing redundant, no redundancy after that. So high render mortal wounds just does so much. And like linking once again to what Chris was saying, Dirthu, Tyrial Ancients, they come up against Terrorgeist doing 6 mortal wounds in this, and they just die because it just takes 2 6s and you just take off Dirthu then, will I? Because it just dies so easily. So double turns and mortal wounds. So I agree, terrible.
Yeah. And I know in the chat they're very keen to learn a bit about the the current meta, especially around some of the striking first kind of mechanics. So we'll talk a bit later about how we might be possibly able to deal with some of the strike first, or maybe some of the double piling in that we're seeing in some of the stronger builds right now. But we'll talk about that a bit after we build lists. Any other witnesses, Laurie, before we move on?
Any other weaknesses? Those are the big one. No, it's just as I say, double turn is what I always dread because just the army does just die really easily. You haven't got. It's just a lack of any kind of mortal wounds, as Chris said. I completely agree with that. Unlike other armies, there's just no way of making things resilient. You're stuck.
I'm going to call out. Go on, Liam.
One thing we don't like is being debuffed neg to hit like any other army, but our army, we don't actually have anything to give us +1 to hit or anything like that. We do have a lot of stuff that makes us re-roll. Like we have a lot of re-roll ones and stuff. Like there's some strong command abilities, which does help us be survivable and also hit harder. But like if we go up against, let's say, a Grot army, which has netters and stuff, we're going to have a bad day. If that makes sense. Like we're going to struggle with that. But we have one of our strengths is sometimes, and which is also like a weakness, is we have low amount of attacks but high damage output attacks. For example, Durthu has 5 attacks near a tree, but like it's 5 attacks, but it's 3s and 3s. You want to get those rerolls kind of thing going on because it's -2 6 damage when he's on full health. So it's like a high damage output. But if we get into like Grots, let's say, and they're like debuffing him, -1 to hit, and you got like Itchy Nuisance or like any of those other spells that just make him like weaker, then we're having a bad time. But that's all that depends on your placement as well. But like you get better over it, but since the book's quite new, I think we'll in like a year or two we won't even care about that anymore. But yeah,
I will call out one weakness that isn't necessarily a part of the book, but it's certainly from a modeling perspective, and that is the requirement of the Wildwoods, taking and transporting that, as well as the army being traditionally fragile from a transport point of view. So something to consider, and I know some guys, you probably all have custom carry cases, but certainly it's a bit more of a fiddly army compared to maybe let's say a Stormcast or a Grot army, which is very easy to transport. Is that a fair weakness to call out?
Yeah.
There's a reason none of the leaves are glued to any of my trees. They would not survive transport. Just speaking of the woods, that is the one other weakness I would say is while it's a major strength in terms of how the army plays, in terms of gaining board position, it's also probably our biggest weakness because if somebody denies the use of the Wildwood and also the fact that the army, all of the points for the units factor in the buffs that they get really from being near the Wildwoods. So if you can't get those Wildwoods down or you need to fight somewhere away from them, the army is massively weaker. So you're also telegraphing whereabouts you want to go by the positioning of your Wildwoods. So that Wildwood, while it is a massive strength, is also quite a big weakness because smart people will play around it and deny it to you, and then your army gets considerably like weaker to use.
That's actually a really good transition point, and I'll ask you, Chris, and then maybe move over to Dan. So we've obviously transitioned from one book to a new book, so lots have probably changed, and certainly in the old book there was a reliance on being a one-drop, getting out those woods ASAP. With the new book, what's some of the changes if I'm a current player that I should be factoring in or maybe thinking about differently?
You're not going to be a one drop. The sheer matter of fact is, I think the lowest you probably can physically get is about 3, but realistically, you're probably around 6. Most builds are probably around 5 or 6, depending on battalion choices. So you're coming up against a lot more armies that actually are going to have the choice of whether they want to go first against you, which, as Laurie said, you never really want to face down a double turn as Sylvaneth, so going second might not necessarily be the worst thing, but you aren't going to have anywhere near the amount of woods on the table that you probably would have seen before. The restriction to where you can actually place your starting wood is much more restricted now as well. It can't go within 3 of objectives, other models, terrain, and it also has to be outside of your opponent's territory. So that's hugely restrictive compared to the old rules where you could basically put it anywhere more than 1 away. They fortunately, with the recent FAQ, meant that the woods getting onto the tables in the game only need to be 1 away from other models and things like that. But even so, once the game started, I think you'll find you won't be getting those woods down on the objectives in the centers. So I think positioning of where those woods will be is a lot more probably around the fringes. So that's probably the big change, and I'm sure Dan can kind of cover off the other ones.
Dan, over to you. What are some of the other changes that Chris just mentioned about some of the Wildwoods? But I know we've obviously had a bit of a reframe in regards to some of the battalions now becoming more of like a sub-faction. So what are some of the other changes?
Yeah, so the defining feature of the Sylvaneth book, being one of the very first books, if not the first book to come out with this type of army building mechanic, is that we've gone away from the Wargroves being the whole one drop, being the main advantage of our book over anyone else's book, cheap and affordable one drops. So we've now gone to, those predictably have gone towards faction allegiance abilities, depending on what you choose in Wargrove. So we're now left with the smaller battalions. So we're now in a position where we aren't playing in that space. So we're playing like everybody else. Realistically, we're probably max getting down to a 4-drop, which is okay, sort of toe-to-toe with many of the other top lists. But I've played probably 10 games or so now since the new book came out. And I've been playing 10 plus drops in each of those and just enjoying dropping out 5s of things, waiting for the opponents to drop everything, and then playing from there. I try to work on the basis that I'm only ever going to have 1 or 2 woods and work from there. So it's a very, very different play style.
Yeah, no, agreed. And look, there's a lot of familiarity between the old book and the new book, but certainly there are new ways to play. And I think for people like you guys who are OG Sylvaneth players, it allows you to keep having fun and doing different things, but also having that familiarity. Laurie, let's talk about swearing allegiance to Sylvaneth. So when I swear my allegiance to Sylvaneth compared to maybe going Grand Alliance Order or maybe a free city, what are those benefits that I get by being Sylvaneth?
So I think the Wargroves are one of the big ones. You get to pick these Wargroves now, which used to be the big battalions. Is it worth talking about those later? If I talk about the general abilities you get from being Sylvaneth, first of all, you do get those Wildwoods, and the Wildwoods, whilst they have been nerfed quite a bit, the ability to teleport anywhere on the board is something which at any point in the game, which other factions lack. Like that is quite a powerful ability. Yes, it's limited, but one boost we have had in the new book is that now all of our wizards know the spell to summon up Wildwoods, which is a massive change. You used to have to put the spell on one wizard, and if that wizard died, then you were basically looking at the board going, well, I can't get any more Wildwoods up because she's dead. And now that all of your wizards know it, you could have yourself in a situation, turn 5, you've got your Tree-Lord Ancient in the middle of the board, or your Alarial, and she can summon up a Wildwood next to or near an objective. You can then teleport through the Wildwoods to that objective and take the objective and get the game. So that's a really nice change, actually, that now you have actually got the ability for any wizard to summon a Wildwood up. And that's why, that question of mixed allegiance versus an individual one, all armies have that, but for Sylvaneth, it's a really clear answer. You get Wildwoods, and that gives you so much power. And as we've just said, everything revolves around them. Like Durthu with 3 attacks is not very good. Durthu with 5 attacks is better, still a bit swingy, but better. And that goes for so many things in the book, as we say, that they do just rely on the woods to make them better. And it is the potential to be one of the most powerful alliance abilities in the game if you can get them down in the right place.
I would say their artifacts and items are also incredible for how the army works. They're probably one of the books where you generally, even if you're taking 2 battalions, so you have a choice of 3 artifacts, all of them are probably coming from the book, and you're not taking malign sorcery artifacts, which I think is quite rare. Even now, with how many books there are, you're still often the malign sorcery ones are just better. But there's such a big range for Sylvaneth, and they're really good for what you need. In particular, there's one of them that we'll talk about when you get to it, on the artifacts, but it's probably one of the best items in terms of how reliable it can make things out of any item I've seen in any book. It's just incredible when you read it. So you're always going to be taking that. So yeah, I think that's one of the things you would never want to give up Sylvaneth allegiance for if you were taking mostly Sylvaneth anyway.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you also can put units in reserve as a part of the allegiance. Is that correct?
Yeah. So It's similar to like Nighthaunt and Stormcast when they first came out for AOS 2. It's 1 unit in, 1 unit down, if that makes sense. So before you can drop anything in the Wildwood, you actually have to place a unit down. And then it has to be like 50%, no more than 50% of your army. Which is, to be honest, I think for us now, with the putting stuff in the woods now, I think in this book you want to, because of the restriction of only moving 1 unit to another Wildwood. Because last time, like in the last book, we could just deploy a whole army, right? And then we'd be like, okay, cool, now this is our actual deployment. And then we put everything down. Like that was our, like, turn 1 movement is actually our deployment. So this here is actually, like, you'll start seeing a lot more people putting stuff down in the spirits because of our restriction on where, like, how many we can teleport through. So yeah, that's a really strong ability that we have.
Yeah, love it.
One other thing as well, we got Place of Power, which is like we picked a terrain piece and we get Battle Shock immunity. Is that right?
Yeah.
But do we all forget about it? Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Cool.
Keep them forgetting.
it's been crucial because I've been running large blocks of spites, so it's been very handy.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, since we all know, but for people who are watching or listening, you pick 1 terrain feature. Sylvaneth units wholly within 6 inches of that terrain feature don't have to take Battle Shock. So that was like a nice little thing GW gave us, which I don't think any of us asked for, but they gave it to us and we're like, cool, we'll take it. Like, we're not going to say no.
And
I don't know that. Go, Laurie, go.
Sorry, yeah, you can pick your the wildwood you put down before the battle begins. You can pick, or you can pick any other terrain piece. You just can't pick your opponent's terrain piece. Is the only exception to it, basically. So you can pick a skull altar or something like that. But that does give a lot of flexibility. And if you can get one of your terrain pieces, so if you can get your wildwood near a key objective, then you can do it quite nicely there. It's a really quite a powerful one, considering we do have low battle shock.
Yeah, I was going to say the fact that actually you pick any terrain feature other than your opponent's one is actually really good, given that your first wood can't go near objectives. Because if there's a big terrain piece that's on an objective already, you can just pick that. It doesn't actually have to be your wildwood, which is really nice.
So you get a whole bunch of rules, which is great. You've got your new Awakened Wildwood, and certainly Games Workshop also came out to say that you can use the old Citadel woods still, which is great. So you don't have to throw those away. I know some people were a bit concerned, but no. There's obviously some advantages and disadvantages between using the old woods versus the new, but nonetheless, you do have terrain piece, which is wonderful. You've also got endless spells. Yep. Yeah. So you've got a couple of endless spells, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but you do have some allegiance-based endless spells, which is awesome. And then it come down into, obviously, those groves, which used to be, correct me if I'm wrong, they were battalions. And now they've become, I guess, like your Daughters of Cain have Hagnar, Stormcast have Chambers. You guys now have this sub-allegiance within to make it more narrative and more customized towards a Sylvaneth force. Well, Laurie's laughing. I think it's narrative because I've built my own Heartwood, which is very narrative, but some people are laughing. So when it comes to list building, guys, maybe quick round robin. I'll go to Dan first. When it comes to list building, are you starting at the Groves or are you starting at like a hero choice? Where's your head at?
Groves.
Chris?
Just everything rolls around it.
Chris, similar?
Yeah, probably Grove, then build around.
Laurie?
Yeah, Groves, yeah.
Liam?
All I care about is if Durfo's in it. That's all I care
All right, so
about.
we're starting, and I wanted to call this out because, if I'm looking at this book thinking, how do I build a Sylvaneth force? Do I start with Alariel? Do I start with, Kurnoths? What do I start? It sounds to me that we're starting at the Groves. Why do we start at the Groves, Liam?
Because pretty much that's a whole different set of rules for you. Like, no Grove is the same. So I don't know if you want to go all in detail with all what the Groves do, but pretty much like you have your Okay, we're doing it. Okay, cool. So we're going to start off with the one that I got selected, for example, to be talking about, like Heartwood, for example.
So let's pause
So
for a
pretty much
second. So before we get to that point, you've got a whole bunch of groves. You've got Oakenbrow, you've got Gnarlroot, you've got Heartwood, you've got Ironbark, you've got Winterleaf, you've got Dreadwood, you've got Harvest Boon. So these are different ways that you can construct your Sylvaneth force. Now, Liam's
We have
going
a
to
lot
talk
of
about.
choices.
Yes, there's heaps of
Heartwood.
choices, which is great.
So pretty much exactly like your Stormcast Chambers and your temples from Daughters of Cain. It's just they all sound the same. But we get given an ability that the whole army has, a command ability that your heroes now know, a command trait that you have to take, and an artifact that you have to take. So that's what the groves give us. So pretty much like if you want to take this, you get a really cool rule, but then there's like a tax to it. But the great thing about this book is there isn't really much of a tax with any of our artifacts or traits. Like you're happy to take them. So for example, Heartwood, we get to add 1 to Bravery Characteristic of friendly Heartwood units that are wholly within 12 inches of any Heartwood heroes. So even though we have terrible bravery, it's really good to like buff up your bravery pretty much. The command ability, which I learnt how to use properly the other day, you pick 1 enemy unit wholly within 12 inches of a friendly Heartwood hero. So not wholly within, just within 12. So Kurnoth Hunters can't actually use this through them. It has to be a Heartwood hero. Until the end of that phase, you can reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1 against that enemy unit. So all Heartwood units get to reroll hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. So if you really need to kill that Keeper of Secrets, you can just pick it and then shoot everything at, like, put everything into it, and they all get reroll of hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. The command trait is once this general is slain, you pick 1 enemy unit within 1 inch of it, so pretty much probably the unit that killed your general. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 6, it's D6. On a 1, nothing happens. And then you remove your model. And then the artifact, which is amazing, it's pretty much called Horn of the Consort. You can reroll hit rolls for attacks made by friendly Heartwood Kurnoth Hunters wholly within 12 inches of the bearer. So this is when we start hearing about 21 bows or Kurnoth spam. So yeah, so that's 1 grove that we get, and every single grove has different rules, and there's a tax or something towards it.
So do we like Heartwood? Is that a potentially good build within Sylvaneth?
It's my play style. Like after playing it, after you guys said like Liam do Heartwood, because I was mainly look at Harvest Boon and stuff in Winterleaf. I looked at this now and I was like, this is way more my play style. Spamming units is definitely my jam, as we all know in my past history. So this is really, I reckon this is actually quite strong. The list build that I brought isn't 21 bows, but it's actually a mixture of combat and shooting. And with Kurnoth Hunters being a great unit, like a great elite unit, you can do some really cool stuff with it and still have bodies on the board because of summoning from branch raves and stuff. And most importantly, I get my Durthu. So yeah, it's really good. I actually reckon Heartwood's definitely up there as like one that can go 5-0 or mostly 4-1, which is really good. So yeah.
Yeah, love it. So and what's actually we'll get to this later. So we've got Heartwood, we like it, we think it's good. Laurie, which one do you want to talk about?
If I talk about Winterleaf, Winterleaf is obviously what I used to take back with my Frostheart Phoenix. His playstyle's changed quite a lot now. Actually, I think Winterleaf will be the most commonly selected one personally. So Winterleaf, first of all, it gives the entire army 6 split. So for each 6 you roll to hit, you do 2 wound rolls, which is phenomenal. It's what Sneshka. Apparently, maths-wise, it works out as +1 to hit, basically, statistically. So if you just imagine, whenever you look at any unit in your army, if you just imagine it with +1 to hit, that's amazing. And that's everything across the board. Anything you summon, it's a really, really powerful ability, and just changes the entire way in which you look at your army. Alongside that, the other kind of key parts of Winterleaf, the other massive thing about Winterleaf is you get your artifact is called Frozen Kernel or something like that, and it means that you can pile in twice. So it's only usable once per game because we're not a broken army like Feck. And so we pick one unit. You pick one unit at the beginning of the combat phase, and it piles in twice. And because of the Khorne FAQ, that's an immediate pile in. It's been clarified that is immediately back to back. So that's again really powerful. So you can imagine a unit of 6 Kurnoth hunters with scythes, with their 6s splitting, so they're doing two hits for every 6 to hit, piling in twice. There's not a lot in the game which is going to survive that. Maybe a massive block of fire slayers, but pretty much everything else in the game you imagine will die to that unit piling in twice. Particularly when you think you can do little piling shenanigans in that second one to try to get further forward with a 2-inch range. And so that's why I think Winterleaf will be really powerful, is that combo there means you can just take out anything you want, basically. Alongside that, that's like the headline what I'd say about Winterleaf, because the headline is those two things there. You do have a command trait where you can, for a command point, or command ability rather, you can pick a unit within 18 or within 12, within 12 of a hero, and you roll a dice for every model in that enemy unit, and on a 6 they take a mortal wound, so that's all right. And then you've also got the command trait is that your general, every time they take a wound on a 5 up, they do a wound back to the person who mortal wound back to the person who did the wound to them, which is all right as well, I guess. But not nothing to write home about, really. As I say, the taglines for Winterleaf is that 6 is splitting, combining with the double piling. So I think that's what a lot of Winterleaf will revolve around.
And that splitting only happens in the combat phase, right? Or is it melee, right?
Phase. Yeah, only melee, I'm afraid. Yeah. So it is. I think that's the nature of that, is that you'll build a very melee focused army if you go Winterleaf. Not very, but that'll have a large part of what you're doing there. Will be melee focused in Winterleaf. And I think that's in Winterleaf, your dilemma is how you best take advantage of that. Are you looking at your double piling being on these kind of hunters? Are you looking at it being on Durthu? How do you protect that double piling as well as part of it? Because it is an artifact. So if you put it on a branch wraith or an Arch-Revenant, then actually they can kill that Arch-Revenant, and then you don't get the double piling. So there's an interesting, it's a really powerful ability, but because it's not inbuilt in the army, the double piling is an artifact, you do have to think about how you're doing it. I mean, you might want to put it on a Durthu, and even though it doesn't buff his attacks in any way, you just know you've got a bit more protection of the artifact by doing it that way. So Winterleaf, I think, is in terms of pure combat punch, is potentially the top one out there. And I do like with the artifact that you have got flexibility on what you use it on, because you can, I've in the past have put Alariel into a unit of it was actually some thralls and some eels, and I just had to win that combat. Basically, I had to do as much damage to both of these units as I could. So at the beginning of the game, I never planned on doing the double part on Alariel. I always thought I was going to do it on my kind of hunters of science, but I saw this is a key combat here, so I used it then instead, and that's quite a nice thing that actually you could even use it to pile in 6 inches with a big block of dryers, piling twice, like swinging around the corner of someone using your piling. It's nice that it's got that flexibility that you can choose what unit to use it on.
Awesome. Dan, what's the one that you want to talk about?
Cool. Well, mine is Harvest Boon, which, to read from the book, is a young and vital glade filled with hope and determination. So that was clearly the one I was going to pick. I picked this for the sole troll of being able to run a Durthu with 8 attacks. So this is the ultimate flat track bully glade. This is the glade that against any serious opponent will just get taken to pieces, but against any mid-table list, you're going to just hit them with an 8 attack Durthu and hurt them. So how do we get there? The main thing, the ability across the Wargrove, is that you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by friendly Harvest Boon units when you've made a charge move in the same turn. So charge across the board, powered by a Spite Swarm's Hive or something similar, and get reroll 1s to hit. For the command trait, actually we'll go to the command ability. So the command ability is Fertile Ground, so this is one similar to others that are available. So you pick 1 friendly Harvest Boon unit within 12 inches of a friendly hero, and until the end of that phase you can add 1 to the attacks characteristic of that unit's melee weapons. That's all of the melee weapons, you're not picking 1, so you get 1 across the entire profile, which is very helpful. You can't double stack that on the same unit. You could stack that on several different units, or apply it to several different units, but you can't apply it multiple times to the same one. The artifact of power is the Silent Sickle, so you pick one of the bearer's melee weapons and add 1 to the attack's characteristic of that weapon. So you can see where the attack stacking comes in. So you've got Durthu with 3 attacks to start. You put him within range of a Wildwood, you get another 2 attacks, so that's 5 attacks. You give him the artifact, so that's 6 attacks. You give him this command ability, gives him 7 attacks, and then if you were to use the Arch-Rev as well, you'd have 8 attacks. So that's how you get an 8 attack Durthu at full strength, destroying basically whatever he wants to hit. The command trait is very useful as well, because Durthu is going to be your general. This is an amazing command trait. I absolutely love it for the trolling potential. So each time this general attacks with its melee weapons, it can make a 6-inch move after all of its attacks have been resolved. If you do so, you must finish the move more than 3 inches away. So the thing here is you can go in with Durthu, you can hit your opponent, and you can then move straight out of combat, so you don't have to worry about getting hit back. Because one of the concerns with Durthu is survivability, is if you're not taking attacks on or not taking an artifact which is going to improve that survivability, then he can go down quite quickly. And of course, as he regresses on his attacks profile, then the amount of damage his Guardian Sword does dramatically decreases. So anything that you can do to protect him is beneficial, and this is amazing. As long as you make sure that you're not going to get wrapped around by your opponent. So if your opponent is likely to charge you, you're shielding Durthu on one side or on both sides with some chaff units so they can't get in and around behind Durthu. So Durthu can then escape out the back when he needs to, or escape around a corner onto an objective. It's amazing. I love the command trait.
It's also, sorry, just to add to that, Dan, it's worth noting that the way in which it's worded, anything which fights when it dies, you've already moved. Because you do it on resolved attacks, it's worth noting with Feck and with Death Frenzy, you move before they die so they don't get to attack you, which is amazing.
Yeah. No, it's baller.
Bowler.
Yeah.
Fact.
It is really, really good. It is fun.
I always found interesting with Harvest Boon in the first book, it actually was the fastest battalion because he gave us so much like +1 to charges and stuff. And I found it odd that like they didn't go that way with this one. They went for this one, they kind of did it very combat heavy. So I thought it was very interesting that most of the other Wargroves, they kept it to like what its original theme was. But I think they knew that Harvest Boon was just way too fast, but they just said, let's make this one the most like hit like a truck on charge. So yeah. I thought that was always very interesting.
It also puts you in an interesting perspective, an interesting position if you're running Kurnoth heavy, because how often do we normally, like traditionally the way you played Kurnoth was you push them forward and you wait for your opponent to charge you and you've got all the rerolls in the world for your saves. You put them in a key terrain piece and you go, fine, you're not going to do any damage to me whatsoever. Now you're really going to be pushing the Kurnoth forward, and if you're encouraged to charge, well, if you make a bad decision and you go into the wrong combat, then you might find that you're actually starting to lose those Kurnoths.
Chris.
Yeah.
Which grove are you going to take us through?
I'm going to talk about Gnarlroot, which is funny because Gnarlroot was the one that everyone took at the start and I didn't take because everyone else took it, and now no one's taking it out, so I'm taking it. So it's funny. It's come full circle. But yeah, they are the most isolated and mysterious of the Sylvaneth, apparently. But they are, the Gnarlroot basically has always revolved around the magic users of Sylvaneth. So most of the buffs are for the wizards, or with the new Gnarlroot, actually it doesn't have to be for the wizards, but they kind of emanate from wizards. So the ability that the whole army gets is you get to reroll hit rolls of 1 for Sylvaneth units that are wholly within 12 of a Sylvaneth wizard. So that's amazing because it's not combat only. It also applies to your shooting. So you can kind of, if you don't want to go for Heartwood and that whole bow hunter spam, rerolling all your hits, you can get kind of a mini one and have some bows and still get reroll 1s to hit on the shooting. The Durthu will also, like Spirit of Durthu shooting attack can benefit off that if you've got a friendly wizard within range of him. The same for like Dreicher is a friendly wizard, so she always gets that on her attack. So suddenly she becomes really, really good at 20 shots, re-rolling ones to hit all the time. So she can be really good. It can make a Laerial Spear that bit more reliable as well. Tree Lord Ancient Staffs aren't that bad. They're D6 damage, range 18. They're all wizards built in. So yeah, the reroll ones to hit can be really good across the whole army, and it's shooting and combat. So I quite like that. The command ability does give you a tiny bit of mortal wound protection, which we said the army lacks. So it's at the start of the combat phase only, though. But you can pick a friendly Sylvaneth unit wholly within 12 of a hero, and then you get to get a 6-up mortal wound save, basically 6-up after damage save. Anyway, so it's against all damage and mortal wounds. And then the command trait that you have to take is really useful. So it's nurtured by magic, and basically once in each of your hero phases, if the bearer successfully casts a spell, so it can't be unbound, but once they've successfully cast a spell, you can pick a friendly Sylvaneth unit, so it doesn't have to be the bearer, wholly within 18, and they heal D3 wounds. So that helps just kind of top them up. And then the artifact that you have to take is Chalice of Nectar, and this is really good. So it's once when you're making a casting or unbinding roll, which I actually missed in my first few games, it works on your unbinds as well, which is amazing. You get to roll 3d6 and then pick one of the dice of your choice to remove, and then use the remaining 2 as the result. So letting you roll 3d6 on anything and using the 2 highest for casting and unbinding starts to make your magic, and quite importantly, sometimes your unbinding, like a lot more reliable. So it's really good. I think it's really cool. There's nothing there that I find as attacks in that one. I think everything is useful. So
that's great. So again, another good grove.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of other groves that we haven't spoken about, which is the Oakenbrow, the Ironbark, and the Dreadwood. General feel, do we like it? Any call outs from this? Or are they all kind of, because right now I've heard all four of the ones we've spoken about so far are quite good. It's not like a bad grove. Are these ones bad, or are they just not as good as the 4 ones we've mentioned?
I'm
Laurie.
I think Dreadwood has a potential. I think there's something there. Dreadwood's, I'm not going to go into detail of it, but the one thing which stands out for Dreadwood is that you can give a teleport to any unit within 18 of a hero, then anywhere on the board outside of. And so that there's 2 ways which I could see that being really useful. First of all, Kurnoth Hunters always count as within range for heroes. So you could pick up a unit of Kurnoth Hunters, chuck them across the board, and they can still get the Arch-Revenants +1 attack. They can still get re-rolling ones command ability that is in the new rulebook, a new General's Handbook. So they can be a real force by themselves, and you can just put them wherever you want on the board. That's one way I think it could work. The other way I think it could work is doing just the old-fashioned thing of taking a unit of 30 Dryads, picking them up and just stringing them in front of your opponent's army, and just going, right, so your first turn, particularly if you're on 30, your opponent's on 30, your first turn, you're going to have to come through 30 Dryads, whilst the rest of my army just gets into position behind you. So Dreadwood, the problem with Dreadwood is it's massively CP heavy, command point heavy.
Yeah.
Like if you're doing that every single turn, you're spending a command point every single turn doing that. And that's why I think it probably won't get taken as much. But I do think you could build an army around that. You could build some way of doing it, and there's some real tricks there.
Well, what you could do with Dreadwood is like do here's a battalions and buy a command point. So like do outcasts and then let's say like free spirits or something, where you're gonna have units in there, and then you got yourself 2 CP from battalions, and then you got a command point, so that's 3 CP. Then you got 4 command points from the start of your turn. So like you got 4 command points, and you're spending 1 or 2 for your first turn for placement. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then like you also got hitting on Wargroves, which saves you things. So I reckon that actually could be a really cool thing if you want to do deployment shenanigans or just be a pain in the ass to your opponent, which sounds like Laurie wants to do with 30 Dryads. But yeah, like that, there's something there for sure.
I think it's also what's really cool about it is when the teleport happens means that you could summon things up with Branch Wraith and then teleport them. So like an end game that could be brilliant. You someone that you've got your arse handed to you. You're really on the back foot, but they've moved off something at the back of the board. You summon up to 10 drives, pick up 10 drives, charge them over there, win. So yeah, I think that's that. There is tricks. Dreadwood is a very tricky one, I think.
What are you gonna say, Dan?
Yeah, Dan, gonna say something?
Oh, I was just going to say that the other candidate for other than 30 Dryads is 9 Sword Hunters. As one of the guys at our local club had quite fun just chucking 9 Sword Hunters in someone's face. Go there, deal with that.
That is gross. It's gross. One other Wargrove, Ironbark is actually a really interesting one because it's the only one that actually has allies outside our usual allies. Because if you run Ironbark Allegiance, you're allowed to have Fire Slayers or Caradron Overlords as allies. So if you want 30 Hearthguard Berserkers, go for gold. So 30 Dryads and 30 Hearthguard Berserkers. I wish you guys all the best of luck. But yeah, that's something else you can like do with Ironbark. And then I know Chris wrote a really interesting Oakenbrow list with trees, didn't you? With big tree lords.
I think you could. I don't think you'll see it very often. If you might see it once, to be honest. It just can keep your tree lords more reliable,
Survivable.
I guess. But generally, there's probably other more reliable combat output options for the points in terms of Kurnoth Hunters versus a tree lord. I'd probably always look to take 3 Kurnoth Hunters over a 200-point tree lord. As much as the 200 points is quite nice, they've dropped. The Oakenbrow basically is all about the tree lords kind of subtracting 2, I think, from their wounds count when you refer to their damage table, and the general gets +1 wound. So
and then you've got the artifact, which is the Dawn Flask, that allows you to have that 6-up wound or mortal wound save as well.
Yeah.
There's builds, but oddly, the main thing I think you'd want if you wanted to have a multiple tree lord build would almost be no grove. There's one of the traits that allows you to kind of have a bubble of healing, which is probably what you'd want to do, but you can't take that if you take that grove. So it's kind of a bit counterintuitive, which is why I don't think you'll see it particularly often.
So if we were going to pick one of our favorite groves right now, is it the one that you guys spoke about, or like what's the current hotness within the Sylvaneth community, or you feel like is the hotness? Liam?
Pretty much we kind of mentioned it when everyone goes to Winterleaf because getting 2 attacks on 6s is pretty much +1 a hit. But for me, the one when I first looked at the book was Harvest Boon because it stacks with the Arch-Revenant command ability. But then after my game the other day with Heartwood, Heartwood's my jam. So to me, Heartwood is my hotness, but I think for the overall community, I think it's probably Winterleaf.
And just putting it out there that I started with Heartwood, so you're copying me.
Whatever.
Just saying. Guys, Laurie, do you agree, disagree? Do you think those are kind of the stronger groves right now?
Yeah, I agree. Winterleaf is probably going to be the go-to for a lot of people. I am dabbling in a lot of them. I want to try as many as I can. Currently, the list I've got, which I'm going to run this Wednesday, is a Harvest Boon list actually. But this last couple of weeks, I've been playing Gnarl Root. So I've been just seeing which one takes my fancy before I put down my roots, so to speak.
I love it. Or as I say on my sign, get rooted. Have we finished with groves, and do we want to start building lists, or is there anything else you guys want to say before we wrap up this chapter?
No groves is a thing. Just want to clarify that. Like, we have amazing command traits. Like, my all-time favorite actually got a buff, War Singer.
Yeah.
So if anyone remembers our first video, me and Chris talked about War Singer being an amazing trait. But it gives you add 2 to charge rolls for friendly Sylvaneth units wholly within 12 inches of your general. So generally your general is going to be your Durthu, right? Let's say it's Durthu because he's amazing. And also tree lords get to teleport for free into a wildwood. So you can have let's say 6 Kurnoth Hunters of size under the forest, lift them up. Then you can teleport Durthu to follow wherever they are. And then you got +2 to your charge. And this also stacks with cogs or the endless spell. So you can get up to +7 to charge almost. And then you go, cool, I'm in. And it's also, even if you don't do all those stacks and stuff, it's a 7-inch charge re-rolling because let's be honest, we all got command points to reroll to make sure we get that charge. So if you don't want to go Grove, there is definitely things there. And also the fact that they've given us wizard only traits, I think is really nice. Like they know that people are going to make Tree Lord Ancients their thing. So there's definitely a thing there as well. So don't be locked in to doing Wargroves. Like you can experiment with our stuff. And I think everything here I'm seeing here is actually really good. So,
Awesome.
and there's a place for it.
And we will,
Yeah.
after we build lists, we will go through some of the artifacts, the command traits that could be good, especially if you're not taking a Wargrove. So stick around. Let's not ruin Christmas for anyone, but let's build that list first and then modify it and customize it. So we have a whole bunch of unit choices, a whole bunch of leader choices. Is it fair to assume that we start our list building process with our heroes, or are you guys more at the battle line kind of phase? Dan, where do you start?
I go with the Grove, and then I will normally pick my battle line choices. Or it's not just battle line choices, or I'll be thinking, what are the three main threats that I want in my army? So what are the three main pieces that I'm going to play with? So is it going to be 20 Spite-Revenants? Is it going to be Drycha? Is it going to be Durthu? Is it going to be 6 Kurnoth Hunters with sides? And I go, right, well, those are the three main pieces that I want to put into the army, and then I'm going to build around that. So what else do I need? Do I need chaff? Do I need support casters? Do I need resilience buff pieces, etc.?
And I don't, Laurie, where are you at with your list building?
What I do is I think I start with a concept. I wouldn't say I start with any kind of model or anything like that. I kind of, all right, what do I want to do in this list? Do I want to, like, if you start around Drycha in Naru, then she's really good at doing precise mortal wounds because her 6 is doing mortal wounds is unmodified. So I might take that and go, okay, how can I buff that? All right, actually, what about Quicksilver Swords? If I put Quicksilver Swords in there, I might combine it with Chris's favorite thing, which is the Branch Witch Bomb, doing that through portals. And so that might be one concept, or I might think, right, if I do an Arch-Revenant with the Harvest Boon attacks, as Dan was saying earlier on, I do getting Dirty on attacks. So I think I start with a concept and then think, all right, what's the best way of fulfilling that, basically? So I'll be looking through scrolls and stuff and just thinking, oh, actually, that would work really well with this. So how do I best make that work? And then you go from there, basically, is my always my approach.
All right. So in the spirit of moving this video forward, I'm just going to pick where we're going to start, and that is going to be Battleline. I was trying to be political, but you guys are making it hard. But I think that is reflective of that there is no one particular way to build Sylvaneth. There are so many different ways. There's so much great synergy, both at the war growth, but also within the heroes and the spells. There's just lots of great stuff. And I think the call out from Dan around the concept is great. I know for myself, I have a very Kurnoth heavy, and it's not because I like cheese. It's because I have this idea that my army is based around autumn. It's based around actually Orion. And I'm customizing my own army around this Orion concept. And I'm going down that route. So anyway, I'm going to choose Battleline. Let's start with our Battleline choices. You have 3 Battleline choices if you've sworn allegiance to Sylvaneth, which is your Dryads, your Sprite Revs, and your Tree Revs. So I'm going to throw the first one over to Chris. Chris, out of those 3 choices, which one do you want to start us off with and why?
Spite Revs, because they're in every single list I write. Because the first thing I do in any list is take 3 units of 5 of them and an Outcast Battalion, and then I'm done with my battle line. And I've already got in a battalion, so I've got an extra artifact, which I think's great. It's 280 points for battle line, 3 units, and a CP and an artifact. It's amazing. For me, it's auto take. Literally, the first thing I do in any list I write is add that. They might as well just add it to auto build on Scroll Builder when I write a list. But yes, they also can be massively underrated just in terms of their actual damage output if you can get them into something. 5 of them, it's only 60 points, so they're very cheap now. They're 200 for a unit of 20 now. They get a horde discount. So actually, they're point for point the same as Dryads in 20s, which I think's kind of amazing. They're 3 attacks each, 3s and 3s. and the champion gets an extra attack. So 5 of them is putting out 16 attacks, and there's loads of groves, as we said, or just the generic command trait that's now to get command abilities to get reroll 1s to hit. If they're around Drycha or I think Dreadwood, you can get reroll 1s to wound. So quite reliably, like you'll probably get about 12 wounds through from 5 spites against and then into a 4-up armor save, you're kind of doing 6 damage into a 4-up armor save from 5 spites for 60 points is really, really, really good. Liam's experienced the Terrorgeist dying to 5 with 5 wounds left.
Yeah.
So
that is still scars me to this day.
So yeah, I think spites are amazing, and I've moved from dryads more towards spites now.
Yeah, I agree. I actually they were my Battleline choice that I built. Liam, have you had any experience with these guys, or any other thoughts?
My favorite OG unit is still awesome. Tree-Revs. I am trying to slot them in. Every time I'm writing a list, I'm like, I need to add in 5 or 10 Tree-Revs, just because I know how heartbreaking it is to your opponent where they left an objective, and just for the hell of it, I can teleport a unit of 5 onto the objective, and I don't even have to roll dice for it. I just get it.
And that's for an ability called the Way Pipes?
Way Pipes. Yeah, the Way Pipes, they sing a song, and then they disappear, and then they reappear, and it's really good. There's some units in the game where you pretty much they get that they've got a similar ability, but they're off the table for a turn, like Chameleon Skinks and stuff. So the fact that I get to do it immediately is great. I know that Anthony, when we first started playing together, you got fed up with Tree-Revs, and I'm sure a lot of other people are fed up with Tree-Revs just doing that last minute objective grabbing. So they're still like amazing. It's interesting though, because in our first video, we talked about how dryads are on all our lists. They're still in our list, but they're via Branch Wraith, if that makes sense. Like they're still like a Battleline choice, but they're coming from the Branch Wraith. So yeah, so when I'm writing lists, I always add in at least 1 unit of Tree-Revs, and not as many dryads.
Quick question for yourself, Liam, and then we'll kind of go back to Chris for a second. When you're building out your Tree-Revs, are you taking multiple small units? Are you taking big blocks of them? What does that combination look like for the Tree-Revs?
So at the moment, as we all know, when I write lists, I'm very minimal and then maxing out stuff. Like we've seen it with my Feck and my daughters, like that's how I play and how I write lists. So for me, I actually do 1 unit of Tree-Revs and I aim for 10. They have a 6-inch pile-in, and you want all of them in combat because they actually are quite good in combat. It might surprise you. They're great to snipe out little characters that are left alone, especially, let's say, like a Necromancer that's behind some skellies. Just come behind, kill it, and then you're good to go. So, yeah, like that's pretty much it, really. It's just like but like if you can't do 10, 5 is perfect enough just to be a last-minute objective grabber. Like I am literally writing lists and making sure that they're in there because I know that ability could win me the game like 9 out of 10 times.
So when you're using the Way Pipes and you're teleporting, when it comes on the board and I guess you're threatening an objective, is that count as a setup or is that count as a move for the purpose of grabbing an objective?
I think it's pretty much a setup. It's a redeploy. Yeah, so it's one of the things where if an objective such as Duality of Death, you have to move on to it, they're not going to get it. Yeah, if that makes sense.
But it's also a way to challenge an objective as well, or set up for a next turn. Teleport and then go for a weak objective.
Go, Laurie. What are you going to say?
So just very quickly, it's because it's worth noting that they get to reroll 1 dice per phase. It's worth mentioning that in combination with it. So they get to that charge, they can teleport anywhere on the board and then make that charge. They reroll 1 of the dice. I spent about 20 minutes trying to work out what the odds were of making a 9-inch charge when you reroll 1 dice. I couldn't do it, but I think it's quite good, basically.
Yeah.
They've actually changed that slightly, Laurie. You reroll the charge roll. It's not just 1 die. So you reroll a charge.
The wording of it. It's the whole roll.
Yeah,
now.
you reroll a charge roll, which is 2 dice for a charge roll. So you reroll both dice.
Okay. Still good.
Thing for me with Tree-Revs, you never use them really turn 1 or 2. You use them turn 3 and onwards. Like you don't show your cards. Like it's pretty much like poker. You don't show tell you like what your cards are like early on. You bluff and you just pretty much then like near the end go, cool, here's my royal flush, and then you win your game by that. So yeah.
To the extent that you're using them in the first 2 turns, it's protecting your backboard edges, your back corners from teleporters, people coming on, beastmen, whatever weird shit comes on from behind you.
Yeah, they're a great annoying unit. And at 80 points, they're a steal. I remember when they used to be 100 points and I still took them. So when they got cheap, I'm like, thank you, GW. So yeah.
I know as an opponent, it would drive me insane, especially with my free people where, you know, a lot of my army was based almost like a castle where I'd have a general or a hero, you know, basically behind a line and being as protective as it possibly could, and having those guys jumping behind the line made me kind of rethink the strategy or the focus area. So it is a good ability, and it's always that threat, especially if they know that you can teleport. It's just when, and you know, keeping your opponent honest and always guessing.
Yeah, that is great. So they're my Battleline choice always.
Chris, quick one back to you for a second. I'll ask you the same question I asked Liam. When you're building a Sprite Revs, are you going big units, small units? Are you going just one of them? What's a good guess for that area?
I'm always taking 3 units just because you have to for the outcasts, and that's my Battleline done. Pretty much all the lists I'm writing realistically are based on what I have, and I have 20 spites. So I'm either doing 3 5s or I'll do 1 10 and 2 5s, but that's just because I only own 20. I have written a list which has 2 units of 20 and a 5, which I think could be viable. The only thing I would say is they are fragile. They don't have any minuses to hit that Dryads have. They don't get the extra armor save that big units of Dryads have, and their bravery is pretty pants, so they could run away. And they are on 32 mils with 1 inch reach. So for a combat output, I'm not sure a 20 will do the work. So it might not be optimal, but there could be something in there because, yeah, in a Naru with Drycha around when they're re-rolling ones to hit and wound, into the right targets, I think they could do some work, and it is still only 200 points for 20 models. So I think it's not a bad choice, but generally I'm just going 3 5s because there's so much else I want to spend points on. So
yeah, I think that's the beautiful thing about Sylvaneth. Laurie, let's talk about the ugly cousin now, formerly the golden child, the one that hasn't been spoken about yet. And that is the humble dryad, or as we like to call in the free cities, the twigs. Talk us about dryads. What would we like them? How big are those units? How do we use them? What's the take on dryads?
So the reason why we're all talking about Dryads' role being lessened is that there's been a big change to their negative modifier to hit. It used to be within 3. It's now wholly within 6. Now, when it was within 3, you could take 1 Dryad, put it within 3 of a wildwood, and then string them all out. And they'd all be -1 to hit, and everyone loved that, regardless of what they say. Actually, they really enjoyed that experience. But now, because you can't string them as much, it means that that ability has been hit a little bit. Nonetheless, they've still got a really important role. First of all, they are, as we've said, they are still more tanky. They get a 4 armor save if they got 10 or more models. You can get them in cover, obviously, because you bring your own terrain with you. So them in cover on a 3 armor save -1 to hit is still really tanky. Like if you can get them near an objective, that's still brilliant. That's the obvious thing about them. The other thing worth noting is that they are movement 7. Whilst we can teleport, outside of teleports, we are predominantly quite a slow army. There's a lot of movement 5 in the book. And movement 7, whilst it's not a massive difference, does just help you in those situations where you need to move somewhere and you can't teleport. Like if you're playing a good player, they might be really good at blocking off their backboard, stopping a Tree-Revenants getting in. They might have stopped you from getting wildwoods down. Dryads can move 7 is actually quite useful in that situation where you need to move places, and that 2 inches can make quite a bit of difference. So they do still function in some of my lists. One final thing as well is that they are a 2-inch range. They're on 32 mil bases, but they are a 2-inch range, which means they still do attack in 2 ranks. And if you can take advantage of something like an Arch-Revenant, giving them +1 attack, I still think there's a list there where you just spam that. Like perhaps in Harvest Boon, you take 20 of them, they fight in 2 ranks with 2 extra attacks each. That's 8 attacks per rank, basically. The issue is they're still forced to wound, but there's a cheeky little artifact which lets you reroll wounds. So I think there's still, maybe I just like Dryad Spam. Maybe I just like Dryad Spam. Maybe there's something deep within me that just likes Dryad Spam, but I still think there's something there for Dryads. Different kind of role to Tree-Revenants and Spite-Revenants, but I still write lists with them in.
The battalion that they're in is amazing though.
Yeah, it's true.
Forest Folk is actually gives out of all of the battalions, in my opinion, they actually have the strongest ability from a battalion, which is retreat and charge. And like we see that with Doors of Cain, where everyone's looking at Slaughter Troop, where it's like the retreating, charging shenanigans and stuff, and that just makes them so much more faster moving. Like they're not like, you might be thinking, oh, they're in combat, they're going to be stuck there for a little while. Like Dryad's like, no, we can now do this. And the fact that that battalion also fills in one hero slot and three of your battle line, like you just lowered your drop completely. So that's also another thing if you want to do Dryad Spam is I would highly recommend putting in Forest Folk because really strong battalion. And yeah, I retreat and charge. I'll take that any day if I can slot it in. Like if I want to do, like I've written some lists with that and it was just too good not to not take. So yeah.
Because it's an interesting dilemma there because Forest Folk is much better. Outcast, we haven't even mentioned Outcast's ability, which is what, D3 more flee if the battle shock test has failed. I mean, it's all right, but there's nothing special. You're taking it because of the artifact of the CP, whilst Forest Folk is a really powerful one. But Forest Folk is min cost of 520 points. Yeah, you get a 3 battle line. Yeah, you got a branch riff in there. But if you compare that to Outcasts for 280, if you're viewing it as I just want to tick the box, then of course you're going to go Outcasts. But if you think actually I'm going to take advantage of this ability, then you're going to go Forest Folk. So it's once again a really nice dilemma within the book.
Like you can do one block of 30, 20, 10, so 30, 20, 10, and then you got the 10 unit's going to chill at the back, let's be honest. And then the unit of 30 is going to go off being a nuisance. The other unit of 20 is then just going to go off and be another nuisance, but not as much. And they can pretty much be like, as long as it has one character flying around, like for example, Tree Lords teleporting wherever they are, they're generally going to be fine, or even some Kurnoth Hunters as well. Like your opponent's going to have a really crappy time, and they've got to remember why Dryads were busted, and they pretty much still are, but like as Laurie said, the make one hit has been changed. So yeah.
So it sounds like that there is no one auto-include. The Dryads used to be the auto-include in the old book. It sounds like all three are now great viable options, all with unique strengths and ways that could be built in battalions as well. So just for anyone who's new to the book, Forest Folk and Outcast that we referred to earlier are battalions that we'll talk about a little bit later. Chris, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, the main thing that I think was prevalent in almost every list at the start of Sylvaneth in Age of Sigmar was Tree-Revenants in a household, because that ability to stop enemies from retreating is still huge. And Tree-Revs are still quite cheap. And I was going to say that when Laurie touched on earlier in terms of list design in general, is thinking of a concept. That's very much how I write my lists as well, because I write so many that I'll think, okay, what do I want to do with this particular list? And so Tree Revs, one of the builds around that I thought of is you can do them as extremely reliable assassins units. To be honest, of 10, they're one of the most reliable teleporting units to then make charges with various buffs that we'll get onto. And with extra attacks, they can actually make a lot of damage. And suddenly, with a 6-inch pile-in as well, if you're in household with that unit and you've got enough to kind of hold it, you can tag up so much stuff just within 2.9 that can't necessarily get to you, because they might have a rubbish battle line unit next to you, but there's a hero the other side of that battle line unit that can't get to you, but it's within 3, and you can just jump in and just tag so much of their army and go, well, you can't retreat from me, so you're now just stuck here. And it's going to take them time to clear it. And when that's coming from a battle line unit as well, it's always great. Like, they have amazing options.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to talk about from a battle line point of view? I think we've kind of had a nice little overview of the 3 different battle line choices. Again, no particular one stands out the most, which is also a good thing.
All our battle line have a horde discount, which not a lot of armies get. So you could literally spam that one Battleline unit and you'll get them for cheaper. So that's another point to add in, that we actually, our Battleline are so like are great just to do big blocks of 20 tree revs or block of 20 spite revs, 30 dryads. They're pretty good.
I think tree revs get at 30 though, don't they? That's the
30.
problem. Yeah, so it's 420.
That's even
for
better.
30. Yeah, I mean, I've never seen someone run it. Please, someone run a 30 Tree-Revenants for 420.
And tell us how it goes.
Yeah, tell
Very
us how it goes.
expensive.
I'm not
That's
gonna do
that's
that,
all.
but yeah.
That's all, almost 1/4 of a 2,000-point army. So, or at least 1/5. So it's quite an expensive investment in one unit. So,
Super cool.
if it's working, get into the chat in the comment section or tweet us. One of us, there's going to be many of us on Twitter. Let us know how you're going with a big block of 30 tree revs. You guys have a lot of hero choices, and I think that's one of the sexy things that I like about the Sylvaneth book. For my correct calculations, you have 8 choices. You've got the Arch-Rev, the Branch Wraith, the Branch Witch. You've got that Underworld. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it because I will butcher it. You've got
Ilthari.
Alariel. Go on, Chris.
Ilthari.
Yeah, I was not going to go down there. You got Drycha, you got Durthu, and you got the Tree Lord Ancient. Dan, what's the first hero choice you'd want to call out in a list? And again, conscious that the different groves are going to reward different play styles and different heroes. But you know, when you're looking at hero choices, what's one that really stands out for you? Why? What's the ability that you really like? Give us the rundown.
Well, the sort of auto-include answer is the Branch Wraith, right? Branch Wraith, incredibly low cost, 80 points for the caster. It's the ability to summon a 100-point unit. But we've sort of covered off what's so great about the Branch Wraith up to this point, and she's always an auto-include. So I wanted to mention Drycha because I've put Drycha in every single list that I've written since. And people look at Drycha and go, okay, well, this is a model that didn't get much use under the previous iterations of the book, largely for sort of cost and vulnerability. And she's still an expensive model. She's still 320 points. But you look at what she does in terms of the changes to her rules and the fact that she is a caster. So I'm often playing lists where the only 2 casters in my list are one Branch Wraith and Drycha. And the changes that Drycha has had makes her more reliable. So you used to have this mechanic where she was either angry or sad, which would either buff combat or shooting. Now you can pick at the beginning of the battle round. So not the beginning of your turn, but at the beginning of your battle round, you can pick whether you want to buff her shooting or buff her combat ability. Each of those have got an attack profile with 10 attacks. If you buff them, and that's the one that you choose for that round, then you roll 20 dice instead of 10. And you're very much fishing for 6s on both of those because she has abilities where if you roll a 6, you get a mortal wound in addition to the damage. I was just double checking that was in addition. No, it's not an addition. It's an attack sequence ends. So important distinction there. So very, very useful. Let's talk about the other ways that you can use that. So she is a 27-inch threat range when you take into account her her shooting attack, because she's got a 9-inch move base, and then she's got an 18-inch when she's at full health, an 18-inch shooting attack. So that is incredibly useful for being able to push up and snipe out small supporting heroes. So you're generally not pushing her forward and going to be targeting a horde with that because you're reliant on 6s for most of the damage. Though in saying that, even if you don't get 6s, then she's 4s, 3s, -1 range, 1 damage. So you're still getting a fair enough in to take out a support character. So she's very, very useful for that. The sort of downsides, the 320 points we talked about. She's only 10 wounds. She's a 3-up save. But she will go down if you're putting her in the wrong place. An important thing to remember, and despite having used her in 10 games now, I have forgotten in every single game, is that she allows Spite-Revenants that are wholly within 16 inches of the model to reroll wounds of 1. So always forget that. Which is that she's a wizard. Her War Scroll spell's not particularly good in that it's largely just focused on bravery. So if you were doing a bravery debuff spell, then you use it. Generally, if I'm running her, then I'm either taking regrowth on her as another backup for regrowth, or if I'm feeling particularly aggro and aggressive, I'll stick Dwellers on her, purely on the basis that I know I'm going to be shoving her into someone's face and then casting Dwellers below at short range. So
Sick.
that's lovely Drycha.
I do like that we're starting to see the return of OG heroes like Drycha and Durthu, who kind of got forgotten in the last, say, 6 to 12 months for, in favor of Valerial. So
He was never forgotten. I have no idea what you're on about. He was never forgotten.
well, for Liam, look, Liam, we'll get to. I'm sure we'll get to you and Durthu soon, unless I let Chris Welfare steal that thunder, and then Laurie will be after that. So, guiding the conversation, Chris, what's your hero choice that you would talk about?
So Dan literally said perfectly what I was going to say in terms of I want to say this other thing, but realistically it's always the Branch Wraith because she just will be in any list. So barring that, Tree Lord Ancient now for me is where I'm going, and loads of people are probably going what, but I think he's back. He's had a bit of a hiatus over the last year or so, mainly as soon as they changed his rule for setting up woods to be 3 away from terrain and models. It made them literally impossible. So I'm glad that isn't applied to all Sylvaneth woods now, because the army actually is playable, and it wouldn't have been. So the Tree Lord Ancient for me, I have 2 of them. I used to run 2 of them probably 2 years ago now, and I've always loved them. I think they're great. The way that they've changed his rule for auto bringing wood to the table now is great. It's not on a 4-up. You can automatically do it. The only restriction is you can only do it once, regardless of how many Tree Lord Ancients you bring. So even if you take 2, you can only use the ability once per game. But we've talked already, and constantly, or any Sylvaneth player will tell you how important woods are. So having a hero that brings a guaranteed wood to the table, if you've got choice of deployment, and also you'll know when you're deploying him if you have choice of first turn or not, you can pretty much dictate, see a space on the board and go, cool, if I set him up here, a wood is going to be there, and there's nothing your opponent can do about it if you know that you can take that turn or anything, and you can just go, okay, cool, no dice involved, there's a wood there, perfect. And that in itself is super strong. His command ability is really useful, a 10-inch bubble of reroll 1s to save, so that's great. Kurnoth Hunters can use that as well if they wanted to, because they can be anywhere. So I think it's really, really useful. He can do work in combat because he has 3 d6 damage attacks. Not super reliable. They're 3s and 3s, which is okay. He's got an 18-inch range shooting attack, which is pretty good. It's 2s and 3s, rend 1 damage d6, which 2s and 3s isn't bad. And when it goes through, d6 damage is pretty nice. And then the thing for me is he's a Tree Lord, so he's bringing Stomp, which we'll talk about in terms of overall meta context probably later. But that Stomp, having 1 or more in your army, is going to be really good for, I guess, being a part of the activation wars, being able to compete in it, because it lets, on a 4-up, you pick an enemy unit, and on a 4-up, they have to strike at the end of that combat phase. So it can let him at least try and have a swing before he maybe gets taken down, or other units nearby take the swing before they get taken down, which is really handy. And also he's a wizard. Wizards are really important to Sylvaneth, so it gives you a more tanky one. He's got 12 wounds with a 3-up save. And obviously, unlike Drycha, he can take command traits and he can take artifacts, which is really good. And his signature spell has actually had a really big boost because it's range 30 now. So it's the longest range spell in the book. But you pick a Wildwood Holy within 30, and then all non-Sylvaneth units within 3 take D3 mortal wounds. So once you start putting woods on the table and the game's afoot, and you've got a few choices, your opponent's kind of got this fairly big bubble of, well, if I go there, they can activate that wood, and then I can take damage. And so he's just useful. I think he has a lot of utility. He's not a all-out damage piece. He's not an all-out defensive piece, but he gives you a bit of everything. He gives you caster, he gives you some resilience, he lets other units potentially attack first. He has some range poke. He can do a bit of damage if you roll okay. So he just brings everything, and most importantly, he gives you a guaranteed wood.
Yeah. I quickly want to say, when this book first came out and I sent it to Chris being like, hey, like, check this out, the first thing you said was Tree Lord Ancients are amazing, and we had a good 30-minute debate about it. Like, and I was like, actually, no, I see a point. You're good.
They're back.
But they're back.
They're back.
They're back. They're back. But like, am I going to put one in my list? No. But I do respect his opinion about saying like, yeah, Tree Lord Ancients are definitely back.
All right, well, I'm going to stop you there, Liam, before you start talking about a hero choice, and I want to let Laurie choose the next one. So, Laurie, what's another hero choice that you would choose out of the 8?
I better talk about Alariel. We can't not talk about Alariel as a Sylvaneth hero choice. She's gone up 60 points, which is a bit of a shame. But there's a few things about her which have changed and why she's important. First of all, she's really important because she is fast. And similar with Dryker, apart from, as I said earlier, apart from teleports, we can be quite a slow army. So having something which can actually just push out there by themselves to where there aren't any woods is really important. And Alariel fulfills that role. She's a 16-inch move when she's fully at full health. So she does that. In terms of her role on the battlefield, she's very much a utility piece as well, just a much better one than a Tree Lord Ancient. She's got a solid combat attack, she's got a good shooting attack, she's got an amazing magic spell. Her magic spell, whatever it casts on, you roll that many dice, and on a 4-up, an enemy unit takes a mortal wound. You can combine that with Throne of Vines, which gives +2 to cast. And so that you can do 8 mortal wounds or something. And you can also quite cheekily, if you wipe out a unit using that spell, set up a wildwood within an inch of the unit which is killed, which I've had some fun with in the past of completely. You just suddenly got a wildwood out of nowhere, and you can teleport into that wildwood having killed something. So that's quite cool. She's really useful as well as her speed. She's really useful because she is your only multicast wizard. There's an artifact you can take to create a Tree Lord Ancient or a Wraith multicast wizard, but she's the only natural multicast wizard. Now, artifacts are so important to the army. There's so many good choices that actually just having a multicast wizard, which you can put Throne of Vines on, which means that you're more reliably spellcasting, is really important. So Alariel fills that role as well. So whilst she's still expensive, she's a fast character, she's a multicast wizard. Both of things are really important. She heals everything within 30 of her D3 wounds per turn. Also really powerful if you're taking 30 or a Tree Lord Ancient or any or Drake or anything like that at all. And she can summon as well. She summons 20 Dryads, one of these once per game, 20 Dryads, 10 Revenants of either description, a Branch, Witch, Tree Lord, or 3 Kurnoth Hunters. All of which are great choices. And what's really useful is the way in which the summon works has now changed, and now you now summon at the end of the movement phase. So she can move 16, then summons wholly within 9, which means that you're basically summoning 25 inches away in effect. And if you combine that with cogs, they can then charge. And they could charge 7 inches. So you could take that, you could summon up 3 Kurnoth Hunters with swords, move her 16, someone up within 9, they charge off and kill something, and really surprise your opponent, basically. So while she's got more expensive, the fact that her summon has changed, the fact that she still fills a really key role in the army, means that she is still a really useful choice to have. I really like taking her with Umbral spell portals. Because you could either put that Metamorphosis spell, which is her War Scroll spell, through the portals, or you can summon Wildwoods through a portal. And that Wildwood range is 24 inches to summon, or through portals is about 40 inches, I think, is the effective threat range there. And that's brilliant. So she could very easily do Throne of Vines, gives a +2 to cast, then summon up some spell portals, then summon a Wildwood through those spell portals, because she's a 3-cast wizard, all by herself. And that's really good. That's a really good combo you can do there. So as I say, she is a utility piece. I do hate her at times. She does die ridiculously easily. She just dies, just not even double turn, just dies all the time. And she is expensive. And her Beetle's attack, which is the really deadly output for a combat profile, 5 damage, -2 rend. It's forced to hit, +1 if you've got 5 or more models in the enemy unit. But it just forced to hit. it's never going to reliably take out individual characters. I chucked her into some Bloodthirsters the other week with a double pile in, so 10 attacks, and she did a grand total of 5 wounds to them. And I was just wanted to just kill her at that point. So she can be infuriating in a way which a 600 point or 660 point model perhaps shouldn't be, but she still fills so many things within the army that I do still love her.
Yeah, that's cool. She's expensive, but she's good, I think. But knowing what she does and being very clear on that role is important.
I think, I was just going to say, I think it's probably, as much as I begrudge that she's gone up 60 points, and that's why I'm dropping her, because there's a few other changes that were worse. She lost her own D3 heal as well. But I do agree the Grove changes have made her more reliable in, like, if you take, for example, in Winterleaf, yes, you're hitting on 4s, but as you say, 6s doubling up is essentially +1 to hit.
+1 to hit.
And then when you've got that artifact of double pile in once per game, you can actually get more from her than you could before, because you never had the possibility of piling in twice and doubling up attacks. So I can sort of understand some of the points increase in the overall context of the book. And I just wanted to say, because I think Laurie might enjoy this, her metamorphosis thing, if you kill a unit with it now to set up a wood, it's not within 1, it's wholly within 12 now.
Wow. That is good, isn't it? That is good. Yeah. I think I really think there's real tricks there, because your opponent just won't see it coming, and so it's a really nice little thing to do. The one thing is with her, like, because just on that point of her going up in points, she just doesn't have a mortal wound save. That's the one reason why I was a bit upset she went up. She's got no mortal wound save, so she just dies to mortal wounds. And as long as she dies to mortal wounds, 660 seems unfair. But then I'm biased.
I think with her going up, though, she does summon 200 points for free. So she technically is worth 460, if that makes sense. So you always subtract 460. But the other thing is she went up, but I think it's just because the community was quite upset that she could summon a unit of Kurnoth hunters, and then she just goes off on her own little tangent, if that makes sense. And we did see her heaps in the old school Dreadwood, where she teleported, did that setup move thing, and then she summoned a thing. It almost sounds like Chris is nodding, being like, I know what you're talking about, Liam. And then next thing you know, there was many things that we did in the last edition with the book that pretty much kind of made the community be like, she should go up in points, if that makes sense. So we kind of should have blamed it on ourselves, because let's be honest, we're all guilty.
She was an auto take, as much as
we kind of did it to ourselves in a way, but she's still such an awesome model. I think she's definitely up there as one of the best GW models, hands down. So yeah.
And just one final thing. Just one final thing on her. Her command ability's changed now. So her command ability is no longer wounds until your next hero phase. It's now every single phase, but it's reroll 1s to wound just in melee. That's really quite important, because actually the one thing the army does lack are ways to boost wound rolls. We've got loads of ways to boost hits rolls, loads of reroll 1s to hit, but actually there's very few ways to boost rerolls of wounds. And on Kurnoth hunters, that's really, really good. Rerolling
Heartwood.
Anything. Really good.
Heartwood.
Heartwood's got it as well, but there's not as many as there are to hit. And Alaria offers that. So yeah, worth noting.
Yeah, when she's in the army, it's definitely command point hungry. So yeah.
Great.
Come on, Liam. This is your time.
So I'm gonna be talking about the Branch Witch, right? Anyways, Durthu is my jam. He was my favorite hero from AOS 1. And he actually got better because he got cheaper. He went down 20 points for some stupid reason. So clearly we didn't do Gear Strike enough with him and stuff. But
well, I think it's because in the last, say, 6 to 12 months, he was called Derpu or Derpthu because he was just fluffing a lot. So you guys got a reduction?
He still is. But he's still so cool. For me, it's just the fact that he's a 12-wound hero, 3-up save, combat beast. And also one thing that we should have noticed, our heroes are very important, and our wildwoods block line of sight. So Durthu, even though he's a huge thing, if he's in a wildwood, you can't actually see him. So he can't really be shot or spelled unless the opponent flies.
He's the John
that means
of the Mortal Realms.
Yeah, you can't see me. And then so that's one thing to mention. The The one thing that he does give to the army is +1 bravery, which, as we all know, that our bravery sucks. So giving Kurnoth's bravery 8 and Triad's bravery 7 and stuff, like, it's really helpful for Battle Shock. And he has a 4-up, fight last, and I think one thing that we forgot to mention is that the impaling rule has changed with Tree Lords. On an unmodified hit roll of a 6, it's D6 mortal wounds. So if you can actually buff up Durthu to be a real combat beast with having not just 5 attacks with swords, but 3 or 4 attacks with the impaling talon for more chances to do mortal wounds, even more damage. So yeah, I reckon he's just my jam. He's my favorite. And that is why damage. He does have the most powerful weapon in the game by damage, I think. So yeah.
I'm going to call out one thing before I get some comments from you guys. I was surprised to actually see he wasn't unique. I always thought in my mind that Durthu was unique, but talking to Hayden Walker, he's like, nope, I want to have a list of 3 Durthus. I'm like, what? And surprise, even though it sounds like a named character, nope, he's not.
He's a spirit of a Durthu.
I think there's 13 of them.
Wow.
In the narrative, I think.
Yeah,
which is very cool. I just wanted to call that out. That is cool. I like that it's not a named character, despite us treating it sounding like a named character, which allows you to unlock so much cool value.
Yeah, I took 2 Durthus to Heat 1 this year, and went 4-1 with them, and it was great fun. Double Durthu is the way forward.
I would take triple in a Winterleaf and just go balls to the wall. And just
putting a Sword of Judgment really scares me on Durthu. Just going
ham. It's more Gear Strike.
Gear
Strike. 2s and 2s. Yeah. Same thing. Fire. Empty.
Greenwood Gladius. Yeah.
But the other thing as well is all the Tree Lords have Ethereal Amulet, have a 3-up save. So putting Ethereal Amulet on some of these things is amazing for your general. Like a Tree Lord Ancient 3-up save, rerolling 1s because the command ability is really strong. So yeah, he's my choice. But another hero to note is an Arch-Revenant. We haven't really talked to him much because he's a new boy, but he is probably up there as the most command point heavy hero we have in our whole entire book.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Dan. So Dan, talk us through the Arch-Rev. They're currently only available under the Loon Curse box. Hopefully will get unlocked in the near future. Talk us through about the Arch-Rev.
The Arch-Rev is great. So the Arch-Rev has been in every single list that I've written. The main started a bit of conversation in terms of the scene as to whether or not he's essential for a couple of reasons. She is essential. Is one, the Arch-Rev is 100 points. So once you've taken your Branch Wraith and you've taken a Dearth or a Lariel or a Drycha or whatever, then you might feel that you might be running hero heavy in points. So 100 points is a lot, but what do you get for it? In short, you get a highly mobile buff unit with a powerful command ability and a reroll bubble. So again, it comes down to what kind of list you want to run as to whether or not the Arch-Revenant is going to be of use or whether it's going to be duplicative and giving you some extra options. So just talking through the abilities. So it's got a 12-inch move and it can fly. So outside of Valarial, it's the only thing that's going to be flying in the list outside of an artifact. It can fly because it is carried by the Zephyr bug, Zephyr Spite on its back. And the Zephyr Spite has another rule, which is that you can choose at one point in the game, you can choose to allocate a wound to the flying bug on the Arch-Revenant's back rather than have the Arch-Revenant take it. So it's when you allocate a wound or mortal wound to this model, you can choose to negate it. So if you do so, you then lose the ability to fly because the bug has taken the hit for you, and you also lose the melee ability. As I think Warhammer Weekly Tom mentioned on when they ran through the Sylvaneth book, you might choose to do this so that you can more easily hide an Arch-Revenant from shooting in a wood for instance, because while he can fly, or while she can fly, she can be targeted. So let's look at the reasons why you take her, apart from the high mobility. And it is very useful having something highly mobile to go to claim objectives and to follow around with buffs. The bubble is a wholly within 12-inch bubble, benefiting Kurnoth Hunter units, giving them reroll 1s to hit. So Heartwood Kurnoth Hunters with bows, or following along behind your main combat units as they're going in. The wholly within 12 inches is quite useful because it means that if you fail to make a charge, you might still be in range of your combat unit whilst it is in combat, to give it the buff. Not so if you're probably going to be running 9 swords, but if you're running units of 3 swords, then you'll keep them within that buff. And the other one is the command ability, and the command ability is very useful for attack stacking. So it's used at the start of the combat phase. You pick one friendly Sylvaneth unit wholly within 9 inches of a friendly model with the command ability, or wholly within 12 inches if it's your general. Add 1 to the attack's characteristic of that unit's melee weapons. So again, that's all of the weapons, not just one in that combat phase. You cannot pick the same unit to benefit, so you can't double stack it on the same unit. But if you've got CP to burn, you can spread it around. So those are the 2 main reasons why you're taking an Arch-Revenant, is for those 2 abilities, combined with having a highly mobile hero.
Yeah.
Well said.
Interesting thing is he does fly. The one thing I think that she still flies. Yep, she flies. But the really interesting thing is that when she loses a wing, she loses fly, but still movement 12.
Mm.
Like
So
I don't know if GW like did that on purpose, but like she is a fast runner.
She's a very fast runner.
Very fast runner. They like screw wings. I'm gonna sprint to that place. So yeah, real interesting thing as well. Like she doesn't really need to teleport. She can just go wherever she wants.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sticker with Hive, move 15. Going to be gapping it around the board.
Yeah.
And you also, she's not terrible in combat, but you don't need her in combat. So you quite often will be running her as well. So that's like 18 inches plus a 9 inches bubble. Like that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 more heroes we haven't spoken about would be the Underworld's Warband, which comes with a hero as well as the Guardians. I can see some cringes in the faces so far. Is this another Warband that probably doesn't transition well into Sigmar? Shaking of the head.
The War Scroll.
To be honest, though, our heroes already without them is already good enough for us. We don't need. They don't fill a role in a slot. Like there is no role that they fulfill competitively. If you want to be a narrative player, slot them in Oakenbrow. I think they got the keyword Oakenbrow. So if you're running Oakenbrow, just put them in there. But besides that, like I don't see much of a use of them.
She's not terrible, but as Liam says, we've got better options. She's 150. She's
180
mid, so 180 points, and she just doesn't offer enough for that. Just take 2 branch wraiths, or take a branch wraith and a unit of Tree-Revenants. They do it better.
Or you could set up for a branch witch bomb with those points.
Yeah.
We haven't spoken about the other little hero, which was the branch wraith.
Which
Wraith summons.
Yes, the Wraith summons. The witch is the one that I'm going to go buy the Blood Bowl Rose special character and convert up because I don't want a double old Dratcher. Who wants to talk about the branch witch Wraith?
Chris is pro.
Yeah, I always confuse myself. I know the models, but I'm like, which one's which? Chris, talk to me about it.
Pro.
The witch is the newer one with the scythe and the little man and the little grub. The branch witch is, you basically take her if you want to do what I love is the branch witch bomb, as it's affectionately known, which is basically an AoE mortal wound output kind of setup really, because her signature spell on her war scroll which is Unleash Spites. It basically hits all enemy units within 9. And it's similar to Alariel's signature spell in that you roll as many dice as the casting result, but it does mortal wounds on 6s, not 4s. But it's kind of a mini version. But the great thing is it is AoE. It's not just one unit. So when you start to add things in like Throne of Vines to get +2 to cast, you put her on a Balewind because it lets you cast the 2 spells. Also increases the range by 6 inches. And then you can also do Spell Portal to kind of have that then 15-inch AoE going out from somewhere that's 20 inches away, hitting everything with +2 to cast. If you roll hot, you can actually do quite a bit of chip damage to an army. Certain armies will just get destroyed by it. Stormcast Foot Hero buff armies hate it. I've pretty much taken off 2/3 of an army multiple times in 2 turns with it. And she's only 80 points. You add in 40 for the Balewind. She can do a lot of work for her points. Yes, you're investing in Balewind casting that spell. Then if you're using the spell portals as well, it's another 70, but it's also another spell. And I think your number of spells or what you're casting them on is dropping a bit in Sylvaneth now, outside of taking Alariel. So you are using up spells. And there's certain artifact choices that you would probably dictate as well to do that, such as the stave, which allows you to cast an additional spell, because that's kind of the main thing that you would take to set up the Branch Witch Bomb. So all in one turn, you can cast Throne of Vines, then you can get +2 to cast your Balewind, and then you can still cast a 3rd spell, so you can still do Unleash Spites. And with the other caster, you can hopefully use another wizard to set up the spell portals for her in range. So all in that one turn, you can kind of put that Branch Witch Bomb out. But outside of trying to do a Branch Witch Bomb, you're better off just taking Branch Wraiths. In terms of the casters, because they summon dryads, and neither model has any innate abilities that give them bonuses to cast or anything like that. But the Branch Wraiths get an additional -1 to hit if they're wholly within 6 of a wood, so they're just innately more survivable. So yeah, outside of doing a Branch Witch Bomb, you generally would want to take the Wraith from a competitive standpoint.
Great call. Cool. I do normally at this point I would ask you guys about the non-Battleline units, but I think that's a debate that's going to be quite fiery and interesting. So I'm going to quickly take a side street into your one and only Behemoth choice, which is your Tree Lord. Laurie, any thoughts on the traditional Tree Lord model?
The issue is he's always in competition with Kurnoth Hunters. The same points, both of them 200, and he just isn't as good as Kurnoth Hunters. If you compare him to 3 Kurnoth Hunters, he's got less wounds, sort of a worse armor save. That Kurnoth Hunter's armor save can be a 4-up rerollable armor save, whilst the Tree Lord's is a 3-up. His combat attack is swingy as hell. 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, -1 and d6 damage. So he just doesn't do it really. That's the problem. He's a little bit, once again, he's a bit of a jack of all trades in that he's got 6-inch move. He's got a shooting attack, but it's only 5 1 damage each. He's got a bit of a combat potential. Like, he just doesn't do one thing very well. Unlike Kurnoth Hunters, where you can just pick the type you want and they do it very well. The one thing which perhaps you might see him being used for is his stomp. So anything which is a Tree Lord, so that's a Tree Lord Ancient, and Durthu, gets the stomp, which has been changed now, as we were saying, that makes you pick a unit within 3 on a 4, but quite last. Now, there's no reason why you can't have multiple stomps on the same unit. So you might take a Tree Lord, an Ancient, and Durthu, put them all into the same unit, and then roll that 4-up 3 times. And because a 4-up is swinging as hell, but 3 4-ups should guarantee you it. Well, it won't, but it gives you a lot greater chance to it, basically. So that's the one role, perhaps, outside of Household, which we mentioned earlier on, where the Tree Lord you can't retreat from. Outside of the trickeries of that, the one thing you might see with a Tree Lord is it being used to kind of spam stomps, basically, and to fight and to enter into those activation wars, which I hate the phrase. But yeah, that is the one thing which he does offer. But he's 200 points, and you just take 3 Kurnoth Hunters almost all the time instead.
Speaking of Kurnoth Hunters, let's talk about our non-Behemoth, but our only other choice that sits outside of the battle line, which is the Kurnoth Hunter. And if you're new to Sylvaneth, the reason I'm making a little bit of a deal about this is because it is the ever debate that's always going to happen, and I don't think anyone ever is going to work out which one is better. Is it the swords? Is it the scythes? Is it the bows? And there's been many Twitter discussions that have happened with no resolution on which one is better. So, guys, how do we tackle this? How do we tackle the Kurnoths? I think overall, Kurnoths are the winner in this book. Is that a fair call?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we all fans of the Kurnoth?
Yeah.
Yeah, they should be 180 points, but like we can live with 200. But yeah, we can live with that.
All right, so I'm going to do a round robin here and just quickly find out first, if you could only build one type of Kurnoth, which would it be? Liam.
Scythes.
Laurie.
Size.
Dan.
Sides.
Chris.
Bows.
Thank you. I'm trying to find who could lead the conversation. Chris, lead the conversation. Talk to us about bows. Why are bows good? Basically sell to the internet right now why they should build their Kurnoths as bows.
30-inch range. 30
and then remove yourself from the chat.
All right, Chris. So first off, they've got a 30-inch threat range. Talk to us some more about this type of build.
Yeah, so 30-inch range. Range is super important for pinging off support heroes. So many armies rely around little support characters that if you can kill that character, you break huge amounts of synergy. Skaven actually being one of them. Like if you kill a Arch Warlock in Skaven, like all the strong builds, you take off 2/3 of their synergy. So bows let you do that. Scythes and swords in combat won't, because they can screen you all day long. But if you can just ping off their characters, 30-inch range, there's almost no way you can hide from that. Terrain dependent, but given that you have multiple options of teleporting, you can usually get an angle. All variants are equally resilient in terms of that armor save. So you just one unit of 3 gives you 15 wounds. As Laurie mentioned before, you can get rerollable armor saves in the combat phase. So if you're bunkered down in combat, you can actually have in cover rather, you can have a 3-up rerollable save. And that goes across all the variants, but having a resilient ranged unit isn't very common. Most ranged units, the weakness is that they themselves are quite weak, and they can't take a hit back, whereas Kurnoth Hunters with bows actually kind of can. The issue is they can only now obviously shoot what they're in combat with. So if someone can bog you down, they don't have the ability necessarily to fight out of that in combat. But for ranged poke, which I think you need in the army because you have other sources of combat damage, like Dirthus and things like that, and defensive kind of screens that you can rely on. I think they're really useful. I'll never take an army that doesn't have some range threat in it, and so bows for me will always give me that.
Yeah, and I got to say, I love that they've split out the War Scroll points for the 3 varieties, where I think it's going to allow some interesting mechanics in the future, and at least tweaking and modification, which weren't in the old book. So big win from me. That was the sales pitch from the bows. Who wants to step up and talk about swords?
I'll do swords.
All right, Laurie's going to do the sales pitch for swords. Why should I build swords, Laurie?
Build swords to take them in 3s. Scythes good in 6, and I'm sure someone else can establish why you're there, but swords and 3s are brilliant. Swords actually got a little boost with Loon Curse, so effectively in this rule book, where their 6s now do 6s to wound, now do mortals on top of their damage. Swords apparently, statistically, are better against anything with a 4-up or less armor save than scythes as well, because they've got 1 more attack, they're 1 less rend, but they've got 1 more attack as base on their profile. So swords are great for just clearing out Battleline units and stuff like that, and also still pretty good against heroes and stuff like that. So swords are great in little threes that you just want to go around the board and just provide you with a secondary threat. Swords in unit 3 aren't going to be the big focus of your army, but they are just going to give you that fallback option, something to clear out an objective if it's got some chaff on it or something like that, or a smallish unit size. The issue with swords is that they're 1 inch range. And so they can't fight in 2 ranks. So that's why people talk about scythes and sixes, and why people say the virtue of scythes is a 2 inch range. So that's the downside of swords, but swords do get this mortal wounds. They've got more attacks, and so particularly if you've got something in your army which lets you reroll ones to wound or reroll to wound at all, then swords where you're fishing for those sixes to wound can actually be really quite good. So I'd say swords, if you're taking 3, then take swords. Taking 3s, then take swords, particularly if you've got some kind of way of re-rolling wounds in your army, because you'll just get a big boost to add that with those 6s. And so swords can just, if you've got a unit of 30 demonettes in front of you, then swords are you brilliantly placed to clear that out, basically.
Awesome. Dan, I'm going to throw it to you. Sales pitch me sides.
Sides are awesome. They look cool. And they're great in units of 6. And I've historically run 6 sides as a threat unit, just because you put it down on the board, you go, there's 30 wounds. I have a large number of attacks, I have high rend, and I've got great reach, so I'm going to come over and I'm going to smack you in the face. And so they're a great bully unit for that, and for the moving forward, taking a punch. And you can maximize the ability of the Kurnoths putting down roots. So all of the Kurnoths have the ability to put down roots, and then at the start of the charge phase, and reroll saves, but only then being able to move 1 inch, so you can't pile in very far when you do pile in. So if you take swords or something like that, and you're in a bad position or you're in 2 ranks, then you're going to lose attacks if you want to take advantage of being able to reroll your armor saves. While sides, you can do that, and you've got the assurance that you've still got enough reach, that you've got enough attacks hitting back. So sides are great. They're great against high rend. We haven't really had much high rend in the meta. But they're great for maximizing your armor save and your resilience.
Liam, anything you'd add to the sides discussion?
For me, they just look cool. I just like the aesthetic. The thing as well for is when you pretty much put your the rerolling saves ability, you can only pile in 1 inch, so it's still a 3 inch threat range compared to swords 2 inch, which is, to me, is a lot better. And yeah, I also like the fact that if someone screens something and they're hiding a character at the back, you can kind of swing over. And also you can do this thing with size where you can pretty much put 10 dryads in front of them, and then size can just then hit over. So your opponent's going to hit the dryads at a -1 to hit +1 save, because that's what's built in. And Kurnoth's the size just over there just going, yeah, cool, we're just going to just chop through halfway through, while swords don't have that. But yeah, that's it. And then the fact that also for both swords and sides as well, compared to bows, they're hitting on 3s, winning on 3s. And since a lot of our command abilities are rerolling 1s to hit, we're hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s. And then depending if you have a Lariel or you're running Heartwood, you're rerolling win rolls of 1. So pretty much you're almost just going cool, I'm pretty much guaranteed hitting you and wounding you. So just take all these saves, or take just D3 damage and stuff. And that's when I think it comes into it. So yeah.
And I know you're a lover of the Kurnoths. How many would you have in a list, and what would that look like? And I'll ask the same question to everyone else. So Liam,
me 15 to 18. Is that okay, guys? 15 to 18.
No.
15 to 18, and what does that look like from a build point of view?
So currently the list that I wrote for Heartwood, and the thing that now I'm pretty much stuck with, is 9 bows, because Heartwood has this thing where it's rerolling all hits, and then a unit of 6 scythes, and yeah, and I'm also as well on the side as a hobby project going to be building 6 swords as well. So Yeah, so pretty much I will hone more than 18, but I'll have like that stability. So yeah, that's pretty much how it will look. So I'll do some shooting, and then I'll do a combat.
Also, Laurie, how many? What's the build?
6 scythes. That's in my list. I don't take much more than that. Bows are too swingy in my experience to make it worth it. And I would summon, if I take Alariel, I summon swords with her quite frequently. But 6 scythes tends to be my go-to.
Dan, how many? What do they look like?
It's either a 6-side list like Laurie's, or it is 6 sides and then 2 threes of swords. I haven't taken bows since the grand old days of Winterleaf plus bows plus Hurricaneum means sad chaos players.
Yeah, those are good days.
And Chris?
If I'm doing the Kurnoth list, 9 bows, 6 swords. Otherwise, the most I've got in is 2 units of 3 bows, but maybe most lists are 1 unit of 3.
Yeah.
So
And what?
I'm an asshole from the sounds of things.
Oh, I've got 15, but I've got a narrative behind mine.
It's fine.
Because-
You can play Spam Hammer. It's fine.
Yeah.
And just to connect the dots with Heroes and Kurnoths, by the way. So there is some connection between the Arch-Rev and your Kurnoth hunters, and there's a bit of a command ability kind of thing that doesn't require a range. Is that correct? Chris, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, so Kurnoth hunters have a rule where they always count as being in range of any command abilities. But dependent on the wording of the command ability, it can be a bit funny around that. So like the Tree Lord Ancient has a 10-inch bubble, as I mentioned before, to save. You have to pick. So it's not like you do that around him and any Kurnoths get it. You can either use it around him or you can use 1 unit of Kurnoths to be the projection of that bubble. But things like we talked about with the Heartwood command ability, that one can't be used from the Kurnoths because you actually have to pick a unit within range of a Heartwood hero. It's not being affected on the Kurnoths themselves, so they can't actually do that one. So it's quite strange, but generally they always count as being in range of any command abilities being used. So
Perfect. So we've got battalions to choose from, and we've certainly got a range of them. You've got your forest folk, your free spirits, household, Lord of the Clans, outcast, wargrove. That's it. Now, battalions seem important for you guys. 1, you get some cool abilities. 2, it's an easy way to get command points. And I can't remember who mentioned it earlier that in some particular builds, Sylvaneth can be quite command point heavy. So round robin, which ones are our favorites and why? Dan Shorts, kick us away. Which are your favorites?
Battalions. Outcasts, cheap, small, useful.
So Outcast allows us to have the Sprite Revs. I think it comes at 180 points, so it's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah.
If you go like a really cheap 280, 3 Battleline plus your basic. At the minimum. Is that the only reason why you're taking Outcast? Is just to get a free command point artifact and lower?
In the 10 games that I've been playing so far, I've been either using 1 battalion or no battalions. Largely just to see what it's like to play with a large number of drops, and also thinking that the sort of list that I wanted to run, I couldn't really get down to 4 drops in an efficient way. So if I'm not going to be at 4 drops, well, I might as well be at 12 or whatever. So yeah, if I take a battalion, then it's Outcasts, and it's purely, and I'm not taking min size. I'm normally taking. Well, currently I've only got 40 Spite-Revs built because they're expensive and hard to come by. So I tend to have a 20, a 15, and a 5.
Solid.
Laurie?
Yeah, I agree with that for what it's worth. I think 25-5 will be a really common setup for Outcasts. We mentioned it earlier on, but Forest Folk is really good. Forest Folk is Branch Wraith and then 3 units of Dryas. It's 140 points, but it has actually got a good rule. You can retreat and charge for new units in there, which is really good with Dryas because they're really good at dealing with crap units with chaff, and so retreat and charge means you can hit something, then go contest elsewhere, and it's a really good ability that. It's also, as we've mentioned before, it's one of the few ways you're realistically going to have a low drop army in Sylvaneth through Forest Folk, because you're going to get within that your battle line, you're going to get a branch wraith in there as well. And if you go a certain route, like hypothetically, if you had branch wraith, dryads, an Arch-Revenant, 6 scythes, and Alarial, like that could be an army right there. That's 5 drops, and chuckers men their spells, and so if you want to be 5 drops or 4 drops, you're probably going to be looking at Forest Folk. I think that's whilst Outcast is phenomenally good, because it doesn't have any heroes in it. It means that you're looking at 6 drops more likely, whilst Forest Folk can get you down to 5 drops or 4 drops. And so that it is more expensive, as I mentioned earlier on. Like, you're looking at 520 minimum, going up quite quickly to like 690 if you've got a unit 30 in there. Like it quite quickly racks up the points, but it does have benefits which come with that as well, both in terms of its abilities and just what it does to your army. So there is once again a choice there within the book.
Yeah, I'd be interested in your guys' views on whether or not we as an army should be pushing for low drops, given where woods are now, and the limitations on getting woods on the board, the changes to the mechanics on how we can get them, whether it's worth it, whether it's worth playing for a low drop, or whether it's just let's go high drop and learn how to play that way.
So to answer Dan's question, I remember when we grudged when I was over in New Zealand for Notorious GT, I outdropped you because you decided to write a list based on like this. And I remember my response word for word is, I don't want to be double turned by Kurnoth Hunters with Scythes. Do you remember that response? So I said,
Yep.
You go first. And I'm pretty sure 90% of our opponents are probably thinking the same thing, where they don't want to be double turned by a unit of Scythes or a Durthu. So even with us having high drops, most of our opponents don't want to be double turned by us, so they're probably going to give us the first turn anyway, which is what we would be aiming for if you wanted to go for low drops. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then why overinvest in battalions in order to go low drops if you've got a threat piece, which means they're going to give it to you anyway?
Yeah, like my views on battalions is make your drops mean something in a way. Like if you got 3 battle line, just drop them all in one go, if that makes sense. Like Outcast is perfect because it fills that role, and same with Forest Folk. Some of the other battalions that we'll probably mention soon of what not to look at, like Free Spirits, isn't worth it. But if you want to lower your drops, then you take it, if that makes sense, if you're relying on that. But yeah. Like
Chris, what are
I
your
don't
thoughts
aim
on
for it.
this?
Yeah, I think it's less important now. Simply put, 1, 2, 3 drop isn't an option, so you might as well write a list that doesn't rely on going first, because as soon as you play those lists, you just, at the end of the day, you don't have that choice anymore. We can't have control, so I don't see the point in writing a list that doesn't work if you get forced to go second. So now it's playing to it, and I actually quite like the fact that now you're going to mess with your opponent and go, okay, are you going to let me have first turn and get my woods down? Or as Liam said, he's like, oh, I don't really want to get doubled. You can force that issue. For me, it's all about just writing your lists to be able to capitalize on going first or not getting hit too hard if you get made to go second. So yeah, I just like the options. As much as I begrudged when I first read it, I begrudged, oh no, this is going to really hurt us. Losing the ability to auto go first in terms of placement. Having played it and read through the book, they've given us more mechanics for increasing charge ranges and things like that. So I think it's less important to have your wildwoods in the middle of the board, because we can make charges from board edges now, basically, if that's where your wildwoods are. So I think you can play either way. Most of the time I'm taking battalions because they're cheap and I love artifacts and CPs. I'm not actually taking them to lower my drops. I'm taking them because I love the artifacts and the CPs. If I need to use a battalion to lower my drops so it gives me choice, great, I will. But I'm not taking them for that purpose anymore.
Yeah.
Any other... Yep.
Just like one thing, like there's a few, like as I said before, we are command point heavy, so probably getting more battalions if you can fit it in is probably worth it. As Chris said, like if you're doing, let's say this, if you have Arch-Revenant in your list, you probably want to try and use his command ability at his fullest. So you probably do want to go 2 battalions to have 2 CP and then start with 1, if that makes sense. So then you can like use his command ability and since we also deploy 9 inches away from enemies and probably trying to go for a charge, we need CP to reroll the charge if it doesn't go down too well. So that's one thing with battalions. Like I've written some lists where it has both an Outcast battalion and a Free Spirits battalion, and I still have 5 tree revs. So I've lowered my drops, and I get 2 CP, and then I get my 3rd, and I also have an extra artifact. And as we all know, we said artifacts for us are very powerful. So yeah.
Any other battalions kind of stand out for you guys? I mean, things like the Lords of the Clan. What else have we talked about? We haven't talked about. Pardon?
Yeah, I actually like
just
it.
said Jimbo's battalion.
I like Lords. I like Lords of the Clan. I'm I've got it in my list. I think my main list that I want to run at the moment has got a Lords of the Clan in it, and an Outcasts and a Household. So it's 3 battalions in one, 4 Tree Lords, 2 Tree Lord Ancients, 2 Tree Lords. I think it can work. So I'm keen to give it a go. Laurie's shaking his head, but we'll see.
Work.
But it's very cheap. It's only 60 points, so it's actually the cheapest battalion in the book. The only downside is that you have to take 2 Tree Lord Ancients. And as I already said, you only really need 1 in a list. You can use that. He's a caster, so it gets you an extra wizard. But it just gives you a bit more. It gives you some mortal wound output in the shooting phase. And having more Tree Lords gives you more stomps, as we mentioned before. So the fact that it gets you 3 in a formation gets you an artifact. It's super cheap. Like 60 points for a formation is amazing with the CP and an artifact built in. So, yeah.
Household.
Yeah.
Household's good. The one I think that most of us probably all agree that's not great is Free Spirits. Yeah. Cool.
High level. Why is it not?
So Free Spirits, I'll put forward a little case of Free Spirits. Once again, in terms of drops, I think if you wanted to have the only genuinely viable 3-drop army in the book is Free Spirits, Free Spirits, Forest Folk, and an Arch-Revenant. So, I think that's the one thing for Free Spirits. If you want it to be a 3-drop army and you do want that control, then you can do it via Free Spirits and Forest Folk. So that's a defense. Auto running. It's the points cost of, isn't it? Basically, that you 3 spirits. So 3 spirits is 3 units of Kurnoth Hunters and a Spirit of Dirthy, which means that it's 140 points for the battalion, which means I think it's 1080. It works out as min. That's a lot. That's a lot of points basically. And actually, Kurnoth Hunters, you probably want to run at least one of those in a 6, which is where you start to run into the problems with it. Really, I quite like the rule actually. I think auto running 6. End game can be quite useful if you're we're a slow army when there's no trees up. If you need to get to somewhere, I think there's something there.
I would rather just pay 50 points for a command point, in my opinion, and save that for like another unit of tree revs and stuff. But yeah, that's like my thing. But Household, telling you like throwing a tree lord in, 3-up save, rerolling 1s with Mystic Shield, and you're telling your enemy units can't retreat. That's great. So yeah. Really good.
Dan, I know you've got to run off very soon, so I want to throw this last question to you before you can drop off. I know it's work in the morning and it's quite late in New Zealand, so appreciate that you've hung over this long. Shout out to AOS Shorts, guys, if you haven't checked that out. You probably are new to Sigmar. Go check it out. But you got a couple of allies. You've got some ally choices in the faction that is Dispossessed and Fire Slayers if you are Ironbark, and then you've also got Idoneth Deepkin, Stormcast, and Wanderers. What are your thoughts on allies? Is it something that really can help you guys as a faction? Is it something that is hard to justify just spending points with? Like, what's your overall take on allies in this army?
Well, there's a range of very interesting points here. So now that we're no longer 1 drop, then allies are no longer going to sort of break that 1 drop. So there's a new space to play with. If we're going, well, we're not fighting to get choice of first turn, then we can explore allies more. Allies, apart from back in, I don't think I've ever run a Sylvaneth list with allies, largely because there's been an option for everything that I felt that I've needed within the book. Now, if you were to go through the ally options, what are the most common ones that people pull? So Wanderers, most people would, if you were to ally from Wanderers, then you're pulling Eternal Guard. You're going to have a cheap block of bodies to stick on an objective, your home objective or whatever cheap. Tyler Emerson's a big fan of the 20 block of Eternal Guard. If you're going for Stormcast Eternals, then you might take a Knight of Zeros, or you might take the Celestant Prime. Both have been taken in armies. They both add very different things. Celestant Prime gives you a tanky-ish combat hero that's going to pop down from the heavens and unleash fury when needed. Knight of Zeros is going to help with the rerolls. You see some crazy people when we used to have the wood spam running a Knight Heraldor to blow up your own woods. Yeah, Chris, looking at you, you can cover that one off later. And Deepkin. So Deepkin, I'm thinking back to my good friend Lee Wilmot and his obsession with all things allies in Sylvaneth. I think he's probably got the world record for trying the most ally combinations with the Sylvaneth army. He ran at CanCon last year and might try it again, running Idoneth Deepkin Eels with the character that allows them to come onto the side of the board and the backboard edge to give you a really, really punchy combat threat just to come in. So that's sort of my postcard thoughts on allies.
Chris, I know you've got quite an extensive Stormcast force. Anything else that you'd add to that, especially with such a deep battle tome that is Stormcast Eternals?
Generally, no. Dan kind of hit the nail on the head with the main allies would be the Prime. Prime and Dreicher used to be quite a big combo, just for the kind of burst damage in 1 point with the Prime's AoE, Scepter, shooting attack, plus Dreicher. You've got the Prime, as Dan mentioned, the Heraldors. I ran 3 Heraldors in a Sylvaneth list at Sydney GT last year and went 5-0. So that can work. Like blowing stuff up definitely works. And yeah, the Azeros is a really nice one for just reroll hits, especially as you mentioned, it works on range, works against everything. So rerolling hits of one's quite nice. But generally, there isn't too much else in Stormcast that you would want to take. Most of the shooting, you'd probably hamper yourself with your own woods from range, so you wouldn't really want to do that. And you wouldn't need things like prosecutors for dropping down because you've got Tree-Revenants. So yeah, while they have an extensive range, Sylvaneth generally, I find, is best keeping in Sylvaneth because the army so much... The core mechanics of the book in itself are... all the units in it are just the best units generally, I find, that can be in the army, because stuff from outside the army doesn't get the benefits from the woods and things like that. But that being said, Eels, I know the 6 Morsar Guard or anything can be quite a good threat because they're fast. They can start on the table, so you don't necessarily need a Soul Scryer either. So you can have that block of 6 to go out and hit stuff really hard without needing woods. So they're a pretty good pick, I'd say.
Before we move into customizing an army list and kind of getting some beautiful command traits and artifacts that might work well with the army, I'm going to plan a little seed for the future, and that is you've got Cities of Sigmar coming soon. So what that looks like with your Sylvaneth force in cities could be something you might want to visit in the future. So who knows? But we don't know yet. The book's not out, but in the meantime, keep an eye out for that book. Anything else you guys want to talk about from a battalion point of view, or should we talk about customizing your force and then getting into that nice, meaty, sexy tactical advice?
Just quickly with allies, I think we forgot the Spellweaver for an auto unbind. Like, that's quite strong. Like, if, let's say, Nagash is around, if he is ever around after his point hike, like if you're like, let's say you casted like Hand of Dust, right? You'd be like, cool, ordered Unbind, and you just save yourself your general. Like that, there's a huge thing, and she's only like 100 points, and she's just like a cheap Mystic Shield, can cast an endless spell if you have them. So she's a really good shout. You did bring up with Fire Slayers and Ironbark, in Ironbark and stuff, and Cauldron Overlords. The only ones that I would probably, if you're gonna do that pathway, most people probably won't, but if you decide to do, Engine Riggers are great. Why are you nodding your head? They're great.
You can't take KO anymore.
Yeah, KO's been dropped. It's only Dispossessed and Fire Slayers are under Ironbark.
What? When did that happen? I swear I read that.
With this book.
The book, it's in the it's at the bottom where it says your allies are dispossessed only if the general's Ironbark, Fire Slayers only if the general's Ironbark, and then it's Deepkin, Stormcast, and Wanderers. So
don't even touch Ironbark then. Don't even touch Ironbark because they just took it out. But Fire Slayers, Hefka, Berserkers. That's it really. Then like that's probably all I would do.
They're still allies, so you can only take 400 points of them anyway.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, sorry, the Knight of Xeros, I know we talked about it, but the Knight of Xeros is really good in Winterleaf because Winterleaf doesn't have any ways to reroll ones to hit. Unlike so many of the other ones, Heartwood, Harvest Moon all get it in some way. So the Knight of Xeros particularly works well in Winterleaf.
Yeah. I don't touch Stormcast, so I don't really know.
I might sign off now, guys, as it's fairly late here, but thank you very much for having me. If I may pose one question that you might address in the tactical analysis stage, is your approach to how we use wildwoods now in this new book? So where are you placing your pre-deployment wildwood? How are you bringing wildwoods onto the board in the game? And how are you going to use them? So I'd be really interested in hearing your thoughts. But I'm going to sign off for now.
Thanks, Dan. And let's actually answer that while it's here. Let's answer it while Dan's dropping off. Let's answer the question. We might as well. Tactical advice on deploying woods. Chris, then Laurie, then Liam.
My starting wood is going to go centrally of the board, probably, given that none of them are going to be near objectives. It's all going to depend on what scenario you're playing in terms of where the objectives are, or it's going to be in my deployment zone, giving me that initial launch pad or bunker. And then after that, to be honest, it's the most advantageous place on the board you can put them. Generally assuming that'll be around the fringes rather than centrally, because of the objectives, although 1 inch away doesn't necessarily have to be that far anymore. So it's actually not too much of a restriction. But yeah, I think they'll probably be more around the fringes and using them more as launch pads, and teleporting around for little alpha strikes throughout the turns to kind of claim key objectives, rather than historically it would have been put them everywhere and bunker your army in all of the objectives and just challenge your opponent to get through it. They're going to be much more tactical, I think, to use now. It's going to be Sylvaneth have always been a finesse army, but I think they're going to be the most finesse they have ever been now, unless you are just Dan Bradshaw, Liam Burnett-Blue, spam bows and don't care about wildwoods. If anything, you don't want to summon wildwoods because they'll block your own line of sight. So you probably put your wildwood out of the way somewhere in a corner that you don't care about. But yeah, I generally think they'll be used more on the fringes as teleporting kind of launch pads rather than bunkering down in them.
Laurie?
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I very much first wood falls into the launch pad kind of camp. I find because there's so many restrictions on that first wood, I find it quite tough to put it anywhere apart from just on my backboard. Something which I will note on that, what I've been tending to use for my first wood is one of the old wildwood models, because actually I think what's great about the new wildwood models is they're much more flexible, much more adaptable. And that first one, if I'm just putting it in my own deployment towards the back, I don't actually care so much about what its size is. I don't really care so much about how I'm fitting it in. I just want to put it there. So I use an old wildwood model for that. And then when I start setting me up during the game, I want to be able to kind of choose and pick and choose and go for different options. And so I want the new models for that. So we're doing that. I think it is exactly the same as Chris. You're just looking for the best position you possibly can. Now that it is 1 inch away from everything, that's not impossible. that's not impossible. So I do think you will occasionally get them in places like you would have old, where they are just right next to an objective. That's doable. I do think that's doable. I think, and this is something separate, but if you go through the whole process of setting up terrain like the GHB tells you to, so 6 inches away from each other, 3 inches away from objectives, or whatever it is, then actually you do find that there's quite a lot of gaps which wildwoods can be put in, and certain armies can block that off really easily, but other armies are going to really struggle to block off the whole board, and you can probably still get some in good places.
Now, I just want to ask Laurie something quickly. Is it okay when setting up your wood when you're deploying to just put a wildwood in a space where you're going to put your wildwood down and put models around it, and then take it off and go, okay, now I'm going to summon my wildwood here?
Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. You just happen to put it there. I might ask my opponent first of all whether it's fine to do that. Is that accidentally him, or I might ask my opponent, but that's fine. Did you have a little clash over that?
Oh, this is just Liam.
It's just like,
and I don't think it's cool, but I let him do it. But yeah.
I've been doing it since day one with Acorn of Ages, because like, long story short, right? 1-drop army, I know I'm taking first turn, right? So I'm just gonna put that base or bases. This is like AOS 1, deploy around it, and then I'll literally then take it off, or sometimes I just leave it there because I know like I'm gonna take first turn, and then I just go, cool, wildwood's down, and then Chris, every time he came past, he goes, I don't think that's okay. Like, the whole part of deployment is trying to guess the size. I'm like, no, get stuffed. I'm going to see my template. And then he's just like, nah, I don't think it's right. And then we had a huge debate about it. And then everyone else says it's fine, except for him.
Someone called Paul Buckler actually had a cardboard cutout, which was a forest +3. So, or +1 or whatever it was, so he actually would put that down, so he knew exactly where to put his models. So it could be worse, but yeah.
I've never stopped Liam doing it. I just feel like he should get better at gauging the spaces he can put it down. But
it's time.
All right, I'm on Liam's side on this one, but I can see why Chris is saying what he's saying. So,
Chris, let me just say this, Chris gets triggered on my English, so this thing here is like another level for him. Like, so many things I do, but Chris triggers, like, it just triggers him.
All right, I'm using a command point now to move us into command traits. So, all right. So I've applied a command trait, and we are looking at this. So assuming that you haven't taken a Wargrove and you are going, I don't know, non-Wargrove or whatever the terminology is, you guys have choose your own adventure Wargrove. You guys do have a bunch of command traits. You've got ones called the Aspect of War. You've also, I think, as Chris pointed out as well, you've got a wizard-only version, which is the Aspect of Renewal. Of the aspects of war or aspects of renewal, maybe round robin, Liam, is there any ones that stand out for you and why?
Warsinger, +2 to charge. So good.
So Warsinger sits on the aspect of war?
Yep. Yeah, that's the one when this book first came out, I quickly ran to see what Warsinger did, because that's the one thing I only cared about, was like, what does Warsinger do? And then for the wizard only one, I probably would have to say you can attempt to unbind 1 extra spell, or even like add 6. Like, to be honest, I actually haven't really like read the wizard ones, because I never put a wizard as a general. But I'll probably do add 1 to casting rolls for this general while it's wholly within 6 inches of it, and Awaken Wildwood. Because let's just say this, right? A Branch Wraith will probably be your general if you're making a wizard a general. I know Chris is going to say Trial Ancient, but Branch Wraith getting add 1 to the is super strong, especially when you want to summon Dryads.
Before I ask Laurie and then go to Chris, who's a good candidate for Warslinger? Singer
was Durthu.
Okay.
It's Durthu, and then you send in Kurnoth Hunters with him, and then you tell your opponent, do you want to concede now or later? Like,
cool. Apply it to me. Let's dance. Laurie, where are you at? Command traits.
I would just say on the I agree entirely. Warsinger, and then the one which is +1 to cast. The one which is +1 to cast, you can particularly combo quite nicely with Spirit Song Stave, which lets you cast. It's an artifact which lets you cast 2 spells. So both of those spells would be at +1. So that's if I was looking that way. In all honesty, I think the only command trait I would take if I wasn't taking a Wargrove would be the Warsinger. That's the only situation really building, because I think a fundamental dilemma in the book is that you really struggle to do enough things consistently. You can build an army which does one thing really well, but then you're lacking in other areas. Warsinger means that you don't have to have a reliable spellcaster because you've already got cogs up just automatically, basically. So that just ticks that box here. I don't have to worry about cogs. I don't have to worry about Spite Swarm Hive and how I'm casting that because I've got that. And so if you were looking for redundancy, then Warsinger is the only one I'd go for in that respect.
One thing I also want to add in quickly is Warsinger affects friendly units while all the other traits are only affecting the general itself. So it's a very like egotistical kind of trait, so that makes sense. Like it's very much like it's focusing on that one model. When you're playing Sylvaneth, and as you've probably been listening to this podcast and this video, we're talking about full army synergy. You want to pick a trait that is going to help not just your model, but your whole army around it. And that's why Warsinger is a really good option.
Agree.
Good shout. Chris?
Yep, they said it. Warsinger, then Gladelore, but generally Warsinger would be the only one I'd build a list around.
All right. Chris, while we're speaking, Chris, let's talk artifacts of power. So again, assuming we haven't got a Wargrove or we're unlocking one through a battalion, which ones kind of really stand out from you?
Okay, well, there's a lot. There's 4 whole tables worth.
There's 4 whole tables.
So how do we want to do this? Let's talk weapons first. So throw the weapons at me.
Greenwood Gladius on a Durthu, +2 attacks.
Laurie, weapons?
Weapons wise, so Green Gladius, so just to add on top of that, if you combine that, it's quite good in Dreadwood, because in Dreadwood you might be teleporting across the board, and so actually that's quite a nice little combo there. Beyond that, I disagree with Chris there. It's the one area I'm still going malign sorcery. If I'm putting an artifact on Berthu, I'm giving him Gerst Strike, or actually maybe Doppelganger. But I think we're going to talk about that in a bit. Actually, none of the weapons for me.
All right, and we will talk about malign sorcery artifacts as well. But while we're looking just at the book, we'll just call out a few good ones. Liam, any weapons stand out for you?
Ancient Barkblade, damage 7. That's insane for Durthu. Like,
so add one to one. Pick one of the melee weapons. Add 1 damage characteristic to the weapon.
Yeah, or you could put it actually onto the massive impaling talent to make it 2 damage as well. So like you could do that, like just to increase damage output. But I reckon 7 damage Durthu is gonna be like having a field day.
Okay.
So, yeah.
While we're chatting, Liam.
Yeah.
What about the boons?
I probably have to say Briar Sheath or whatever it is.
Briar Sheath?
Neg 1 to hit. Yeah, neg 1 to hit. Like debuffing your opponent is probably it, really. Or another one, Night Blue and Garlet.
You can't choose 2. You can't choose 2.
Good.
I'm gonna go to Laurie, then Chris next. Come on, man. Laurie.
Night Bloom. Yeah, Night Bloom is a quite cool one. You're not visible if you're over 12 inches away from your opponent, like on something like a branch wraith or something important like that, or a Tree Lord Ancient. If you're worried about being sniped off, things like Change Host, things like KO, they can come down and take off your key heroes. So Night Bloom Garland, meaning that you just can't be seen if you're outside of 12, it's pretty good. I still don't think I'd actually take any of them again, if I'm completely honest with you. I don't include any of those boons in there. There's just better artifacts out there for us. But Night Bloom's got potential, as does Frasheath. But again, wouldn't take any of them.
Chris?
Yeah, Night Bloom would be the only one I'd consider, simply because everything else Malign Sorcery has a better version of. So there's literally no point because you just take Malign Sorcery. But Night Bloom's the only, I guess, unique item that you can't get from Malign Sorcery, which, can protect heroes. You can protect your Arch-Revenant. Just chuck in with that somewhere, can't be shot. So your Kurnoth can always use his command ability. Sure. So that's that I haven't written a list really with it in, but it's the only one I'd look at from the boons.
What about the Verdant Treasures, Chris?
Again, I don't really take any of them. Although Life Wreath, actually, I got it wrong when I was talking about the Oakenbrow build, thinking it was the trait that you give up. It's actually not. It's a treasure. So that on a multiple Tree Lord build could actually work, because in your hero phase you roll a dice, and on a 3-up you get to heal D3 to all Sylvaneth units within 10. So you kind of make up for, like, it's almost like a mini Ilarial heal within 10 rather than 30 from an artifact, which is quite nice. So yeah, and then that's my one. Sorry,
That's all right, Laurie.
Stop
Yeah,
being
let's not do Liam. Laurie.
My one is Crown of Falboas. So this is the one which I'm currently experimenting with and really want to make work, because that ability, reroll all wound rolls, is absolutely phenomenally good. Like, the ability is incredible. The problem is there's a restriction range of you pick a unit within 6 inches in the combat phase. So that's quite tough. Like, picking something within 6 inches is quite restrictive, but the ability is brilliant. So that's what I'm currently trying to make work, actually, is Crown of Falboas. Because, as I've mentioned earlier, outside of Heartwood, there's less ways to reroll wounds outside of Heartwood and Malarial. So I'm trying to take Crown of Falboas to give me a bit of redundancy there, actually. A unit of Size or a unit of Dirthu that can really help with, actually. So Crown of Falboas is the one I'm trying to make work. I do think it'd work best on an Arch-Revenant. In the current list I've got, it's actually not on an Arch-Revenant, but I do think on an Arch-Revenant it'd be quite nice, because if you've got his movement 12, as we've discussed, so that's a threat range of 24 for this ability. If you ran him, if you've got Spite Swarm Hive up, it's a threat range of 27 for just picking a unit, and you can just run them at the board and point. So I do think, I do think that Crown of Falboas is one which I want to see if I can make work, because if it does work, I think it could be actually really good.
Liam.
Wouldn't really pick any of them, but probably the Everdew Vial. Add 2 to run and charge rolls for the bearer. Put it on like someone like Dirthu. Just make him forage charge with Warsinger. But that's it. But I wouldn't really touch any of them. But yeah.
What about the Relics of Nature?
Acorn of Ages, mate.
Why?
Always.
Who gets it?
Either a branch Wraith or a branch Witch. Just free Wildwood and you like a launch pad.
So once per battle hero phase, you can summon a free Wildwood.
Yep. 1 inch away from other models, terrain features, and objective. Sorted. Whole even 12. It's good. It's really good. I use that as a launch pad because my Wildwoods are like generally in the center. So yeah.
Laurie?
Spirit Song Stave is brilliant. Spirit Song Stave, you can cast 1 additional spell. So you put that on a spellcaster, give them Throne of Vines. The cast Throne of Vines gives +2 to cast, and then they cast something else. Classically, Spite Swarm Hive, which gives you pluses to charge, or Chromatic Cogs, which does the same thing. It makes summoning Dryas more reliable if you want to do that. Makes summoning Wildwoods more reliable if you want to do that. Gives all kinds of options, basically. As I said before, you've only got 1 multicast wizard in the army, which is Ilarial, who's a lot of points. So if you are looking for other ways, then you do that. As Chris mentioned earlier on, combining with Balewind works quite nice as well, because you've then got a 3-caster with +6 range. So that's a good combo. Spirit Song Stave is a really good one.
Chris?
Vesperal Gem. And this is the one I alluded to earlier when I said in terms of artifacts, and the first time I read it going, this is probably one of the best artifacts in any book I've read in terms of reliability. Basically once in each of your hero phases, when you want to cast a spell from the Sylvaneth spell lore, then you say you're going to use the gem. You don't have to roll to cast. The spell's automatically cast, and most importantly, it can't be unbound. So it's just incredible. If you're like, I need this regrowth to go off, or I need this whatever spell it is. It can't be woods because that's not a spell in the spell lore. All the wizards know it, but it's not actually a lore spell. Otherwise, this would have been phenomenal. But that artifact, like I'm quite using it in Nalroot on the Tree Lord Ancient General with the trait. If he casts a spell, then he heals D3, or you pick a unit and you give him regrowth, and it guarantees me a D6, D3 heal. So, because the amount of times you need a regrowth to go off and then it fails, with that, it guarantees my regrowth, and because of the trait, it is also guaranteed to get that other D3. So I really like it for anything reliability. I love it. I think it's an amazing artifact.
We've alluded to Malign Sorcery being a good place to get artifacts. What are some of those, Chris, that you would call out that might synergize better, or maybe there is an artifact that sits in malign sorcery that is just better than what Sylvaneth have on offer?
I mean, Laurie and Liam have mentioned it as well. If I'm going to do a combat Durthu, my options are either giving him +2 attacks or probably taking Gaia Strike from the Realm of Life to give him +1 to hit and +1 to wound, because then he's 2s and 2s, and there's quite a few ways in the book of getting rerolls, 1s to hit and potentially reroll 1s to wound. So then he becomes really, really reliable just with the 5 attacks. So you have to weigh up whether you want 5 attacks with reroll, 5 attacks with +1 to hit and wound, or do you want 7 attacks without the +1 to hit and wound, is kind of the trade-off. But Gaia Strike is a very good artifact on a Durthu.
Laurie?
Something for me, which I think is actually really good, is Doppel-Durthu, Doppelganger Durthu. First of all, it lets you play in the activation wars, but what I really like about it is that you choose the order at the start of the combat phase, so you can roll that 4-up dice, and if you get it, you can just store Doppelganger. If you make someone fight last, you store Doppelganger until later on in the game, and it just gives you, because gambling on a 4-up is never going to be a good tactic. But with Doppelganger, you're not actually gambling on it. You just every time you put him in, if you failed the 4-up, you activate Doppelganger. You can't be attacked. If you make the 4-up, then you can just save Doppelganger for another turn. I think that's a really nice combo. I know a number of players who really struggle with Slaanesh, and it offers you that counter to Slaanesh as well, actually, which is really good, because they make you fight last, and you just go, okay, Doppelganger, there you go. So you're attacking me and doing nothing to me, and I'll fight back. Going to go twice because I'm in Winterleaf and stuff like that. So I think Doppelganger Durthu could be a really good shout, actually.
The one thing I have wrong with Doppelganger is when you go up against Vec, let's say, with or like Khorne, where they strike first in combat because they're started the combat phase. So if it's their turn, they get to go first. That's probably your only thing with Doppelganger. However, everything else, you're pretty much sweet because Slaanesh is at the end of the charge phase, that they get to do their 2-up and then your start combat phase thing. But I kind of see where Doppelganger is in a good place, but there's 2 armies though out of the 3 in the activation wars where they kind of don't care about Doppelganger in their turn.
It's not really. First of all, I think look how much Slaanesh is smashing face. So it's not so much about the activation wars so much as countering Slaanesh. When an army dominates as Slaanesh is currently doing, you need to think about an individual army, and that's what Slaanesh are. I also think just generally it's good. Not even just against, as I say, it just lets you not have to gamble on making that 4-up. You make the 4-up, you save Doppelganger. You don't make the 4-up, you activate Doppelganger. So it just gives you can be much more aggressive with your Durthu. You can sit a Durthu in the middle of the board and go, come at me if you want. I don't actually mind, because he's going to get to attack you first. I have tried it in Winterleaf. I do want to try it in Harvest Boon 2, where you activate it and then he runs away after he attacks. So you just can't hire him. Can't
Coward Durthu.
Coward Durthu. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. For me, it's either Ethereal Amulet or Gear Strike, because 3-up ignoring Rend makes them so durable, because as we know, we don't have much of a mortal wound save, and when heroes come out with Rend 2 damage and stuff like a Terrorgeist and stuff, you go, cool, there you go. Or Agnek Scales for ignoring mortal wounds on a 4-up. Or Agnek Scales, yeah.
The only one I would call out that you guys haven't called out that I've been thinking about a lot is the Eighth of Quartz Brooch, just to considering that I'm running a very heavy Kurnoth and very CP kind of orientated Sylvaneth list, getting that Eighth of Quartz to attempt to get more command points on top of the battalion and all the other good stuff that the army has access to. So can be the difference.
Yeah.
Whew, lots going on, lots of cool choices. I think again, this kind of comes back to right at the start, which is like, what's the theme, what's the thought behind the army, and the 2 ones that we haven't touched yet from a customization point of view is spells and endless spells. So let's go to the spell table first and the Lore of the Deepwood. You've got 6 choices. You've got Throne of Vines, Regrowth, Dwellers Below, Deadly Harvest, and 2 others. I'm not going to keep reading them all out. What do we like? What don't we like? Where are they good at going with? Laurie, kick us off. Which spell do you like, and who is a good recipient of that spell?
So it depends a little bit on your setup. Sorry, I know that's a non-answer, because because so many of the spells are on 7s. You've got like the brilliant one is the one which brings back Kurnoth Hunters. What's it called again? Verdurous Harmony?
Venomous Harmony.
Verdurous Harmony. The Harmony one. So that's brilliant. Really good spell, but it is on a 7. So if you are trying to cast that, you're not going to have Throne of Vines because Throne of Vines is separate. So if you're trying to cast that, then you're doing it on a natural 7. That's tough. So if you're taking Vesperal Gem, the auto cast, then Harmony is brilliant. Like just bringing back a Kurnoth Hunter automatically is phenomenal. If you don't have Gem, still include it. It's in a lot of my lists, particularly if you've got a Kurnoth Hunter heavy list. It's really worth taking. It's just you are gambling on it. Like a 7 is always going to be a bit of a gamble without any bonuses to cast. So I think Harmony is perhaps one of the best spells in there. The issue is the casting value of it.
Chris?
Yep, completely agree. I think that's why I think with all wizards, the main change for this book was that all wizards can cast woods, and every single Sylvaneth army has access to Verdurous Harmony, whereas before only Gnarlroot had that spell, which is why so many people took Gnarlroot, because that spell is amazing. Like you say, just regrowing a whole Kurnoth Hunter can be incredible, especially if you've taken 3 or 4 wounds on one. That heals up because there's loads of access of easy healing or regrowth, and you grow another one back. You're gaining 9 odd wounds or something into a unit, and it's really good. That's the reason I've been going Gnarlroot, for the reliability. I take the Vesperal Gem, which gives me the auto cast on that spell if I want it, but also the other artifact of Chalice means you cast on 3d6 and then use the highest 2, or whichever 2 you want, but generally it's always going to be the highest 2. So that helps me get that spell off. Throne of Vines is great for Alariel, as Laurie mentioned, but also if you want to do a Branch Witch Bomb or anything really where you want to use like multiple spells through one caster. So you can be doing a Rewinding Time Cogs Ancient, for example, for 2 cast, 3 up rerollable save, or a Branch Witch on a Balewind. Throne of Vines is a good candidate for them. Because it lets you obviously have more reliable casts on multicasting.
Does Throne of Vine stack if you have it on multiple casters?
Technically, yeah.
Technically,
not on multiple casters, because you can still only cast the same spell once in a hero phase. However, they have changed the wording since last book and read like words as written. If you don't move that hero, you can
At
recast
all.
the spell. Yeah, if you don't move or set them up or teleport them, you can recast that spell every hero phase, and the +2 stacks.
And that was what I was referring to, yeah. So, which is interesting because it doesn't say until the next hero phase or until X. It just says if you don't move or it's set up in a different location, that's when you get the +2. So, put on a Balewind.
If by interesting you mean stupid, then I agree. Yeah, it's clearly. I don't think I'll be doing it.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Sorry, I think maybe I shouldn't have said something, but
it's a thing where it's definitely a mistake that they've written, and the fact that no one really picked up on it, kind of thing. And also, just so you know, the FAQ hasn't actually got an errata. All we have is designer commentary, which I find interesting, but they actually haven't fixed a ruling. So I'm guessing they're probably still trying to sort that out. Don't quote on me on it, but that's
maybe in the next 6 months.
Next 6 months or something, but there isn't actually an errata. It's just designer's commentary, which is like the rules that we actually cared about. But for me, spells wise, there's only 2 spells I put in my list because I always have a backup one, and it's Regrowth and Venomous Harmony. Because the other ones are very situational, especially Tree Song. Like that is the most situational goddamn spell I've ever read in my life. Like what the hell?
Pick one enemy unit within 16 of the caster and within 6 of the wildwood, and so
you can reroll hit and win rolls of 1. Like there's a command.
Your whole army being able to get reroll hits and wins of 1 against a unit. I was thinking earlier, like you said, there aren't many ways of getting reroll wounds. That's 1, and every army can have it without spending CP. So it is a good spell, but it's
casting value 7.
It's probably the problem is it is probably 4th down the line of spells you pick.
But yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Dwellers Below is pretty much is the Branch Witch spell, but in spell lore form. So if you don't have a Branch Witch, you just take Dwellers Below.
Cool.
But yeah, that's it really.
What about endless spells? So you guys have what, 3? You've got the Glade Worm, the Hive, and then the Skull Root. Do we like any of them? I think I've seen the Hive being thrown around a lot. I see a lot of head shaking for the people who are listening to this on the Mortally Wounded podcast. So let's talk about the Hive first. Why do we like the Hive, Chris?
Oh, Laurie was excited. I feel like Laurie wants to talk about
I thought I'd throw it to you because people on the podcast might want to hear your voice, but let's go to Laurie then.
Go, Laurie.
I love the Hive. I love the Hive because it gives you, so on a cast on 7, on a 2 up, it gives you +3 to charge and +3 to move, which is phenomenally good. Like +3 to charge is just brilliant, but +3 to move on top of that as well. If someone shuts off your woods, kind of sometimes moving 8 and charging +3 is actually still pretty fast. Like that can still threaten the center of the board really easily. That's still really good. It's also lovely because unlike cogs, it doesn't affect your opponent. I put in cogs in my list to begin with. I forgot how annoying it is boosting my opponents, running and charging and all the rest of it. It's infuriating. It lost me the game I was playing. And so Spite Swarm Hive actually doesn't do that. Just boosts you. It does just sit at the back because it's only within 8 inches, this little bubble it gives. But it's a really nice boost for you to, as we said before, a lot of your woods are going to be at the beginning, at the back of your board in your own terrain, in your own deployment zone. So you just set up around that. And then for things like Tree-Revenants, they can just sit next to it, getting that boost and then teleport wherever they want on +3 to charge with a reroll. That's just going to go and take whatever you want. Like your opponent's never going to be able to leave little characters by themselves if they're worried about them getting taken off, because the Tree-Revenants are just going to make that charge. So Spite Swarm, I think, is really good for 50 points. I think it's really, really good. Brilliant fact.
It's almost like they saw us take cogs and decided to make a spell just for us for that.
Yeah, I agree entirely. That's it, isn't it? Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure we can all say last edition, everyone had. Yeah, it definitely is one of those spells that they made just for us because they saw what we were doing.
What about the other 2? So the Glade Worm and the Skull Root. I mean, I've seen some potential value in the Glade Worm. I haven't brought it in just yet, but Chris, what do you think?
I tried all 3 of them at the start, and the one I was most underwhelmed with was the Worm. It's really hard, I found, to get it wholly within 8 of units, or units that can benefit from the heal, or your opponent just moves it slightly and then it just didn't do much. And a D3 heal or a D3 mortal wounds isn't as impactful. So for me, I'm not really spending the points on the Worm. It does reflect, I think, the fact that it is the cheapest. The Skull Root I like because it can do D6 mortal wounds if stuff's within its 3 or maybe even 6 of a Wildwood. And because it can target multiple units, once stuff is fighting over objectives and you've got woods nearby, you can hit an endless spell out that can do D6 mortal wounds to multiple units. And the best thing is it does nothing against Sylvaneth. It can't be used against you. It's amazing. And then you add on the fact that if any non-Sylvaneth models flee due to battle shock within 3 of it, then D3 additional models also flee. And that's also what Outcasts does. And Outcasts give -1 bravery. So if you're trying to do a little bit of a bravery bomb, I think now that Horrorghast exists, Horrorghast with Outcasts and a Vengeful Skullroot could destroy elite armies, because you make 1 model flee and 2 D3 additionals are fleeing. And like people talk about taking 8 Dracoths or something, you make 1 of them flee and bye-bye. Yeah. Like, it's the power in that. And also the mortal wound from the Skull Root is probably enough to kill the Dracoth you need to force a battle shock. So I like the Skull Root. I'm not so keen on the Worm. But Spite Swarm Hive is the best by far and away.
Liam, anything you'd add to that?
I like the Worm because it looks cool, but like generally because it looks like a Pokemon. But that's just me. But one thing I like to mention is, like, they're all good. They all have their place in a way, but the Hive is definitely the better one, even though it's not the best looking model, in my opinion. Like, there are some cooler looking models for like endless spells. And I generally go by rule of cool and sometimes. But the one thing I like to mention is, again, Skullroot is like our version of Pendulum. Like, you know how in our very first thing when we talked about area control, how we use the Pendulum to deny area? That's literally our version of Pendulum. And like in a way to like scare like a bully unit in a way, like being like, don't get near this area. because it is quite scary getting D6 mortal wounds near a wood. If it's the woods, let's just say it's like wood near objective, skull root nearby. Do you really think your opponent's going to try and get that objective if he's going to get D6 mortal wounds? Plus, also, wildwoods on a 5R do D3 mortal wounds when they get a spell cast near them. So it could be a potential. It could be a potential 9 mortal wounds. So,
good call.
But
Go, Matt. I was just going to say, while you mentioned the rule of cool, it's probably worthwhile calling out here that everything we've talked about is very tactical, very tournament orientated. Obviously, if you're setting up a Sylvaneth army and it's about a hobby, it's about exploring a lore. Obviously, do what you want to do, play how you want to play. This is more about getting the most out of the synergies and the builds to play well at a tournament and an event, and do all that good stuff. So just to keep that in mind, I'm sure you guys have caught on that by now.
Yeah. If I was going to pick 2 to out of the 3, pick 2, I would do the hive and the worm. Is there any that you guys would pick outside of your allegiance ones? Your pendulums, Chris, you're nodding your head. What out of malign sorcery or forbidden power may fall into your list?
Balewind, cogs, and potentially portal, but only if I was taking a Larial or a branch witch bomb.
Yeah.
Laurie?
Yeah, cogs. The only thing I'd say with cogs is that if you are summoning with Valerial, then her summon would get the benefit of cogs, whilst of course it won't get the benefit of Spider Swarm Hive. So that's one benefit that cogs does have over Spider Swarm Hive, is that if you are planning on summoning with an aerial and then pushing her summon in your opponent's face straight away, then cogs has got the advantage there. So cogs does have a look in. It is 30 points more than Spite Swarm, which is why quite often it doesn't make it to the final cut of my lists, but it does have that bonus there. So cogs is the one I mainly consider.
Yeah, look, I personally struggled to get as many endless spells that I wanted in my list just because I was just filling it up with battalions and units and heroes. So it's a hard sacrifice, unfortunately. If only we could have all of our toys in a 2,000-point match play environment. What a world we'd live in. We'd be a narrative world. We've kind of customized our force. We've talked a lot, guys. This has been really in-depth. The last thing I want to talk about is the tactical analysis and advice that you would give to a new player or someone who's looking to go from good to great based on your experience, your insights, maybe the discussions you're having on the tabletop. So to bring it back, new player, you're going to talk to me and say, Anthony, what's the advice you're going to give me about playing Sylvaneth on the table and getting the most out of them as a new player? Chris, then Laurie, then Liam.
Okay, from my experience of playing them the last 3 years is if you play more on the defensive side early game, you will win more games than you will lose. In terms of if you push out and you overexpose yourself, turn 1, you will cop a double turn and it will cost you the game more than if you play turn 1, possibly even turn 2 as well defensively. The army has the tools to push back very easily with charges and push forward in the late game. So yeah, I think you need to not go all out aggressive cogs fast forward time turn 1, in my opinion.
Laurie?
Unless you go.
The tactical side of it, I think sort of agreeing and disagreeing with Chris at the same time. I think it's about finding your play style, because actually I think that they can work with a push in your face kind of approach if you build your list around that and if you practice with it so that you've got a plan in place for when that doesn't do what you need it to, and for playing all 5 turns. Like if your plan is, I go aggressive with these 6 sides and get them as far forward as I possibly can, and they sit there and basically go to the opponent, you've got to deal with me, whilst the rest of your army is off doing other things. Like if you play that in Dreadwood, for example, you might pick up sides, put them in the most inconvenient place possible you can for your opponent, and then go, you've got to deal with that. Whilst you're doing that, I'm going to go and score points. I know that's the way which a lot of players played the old Dreadwood as well. So I think there is a lot of adaptability in the book. So work out what your play style is, and then work around it. I agree with Chris. I think a defensive way of playing with it can work really well, but I do think offensively could work as well. But you would have to think about redundancies and think about what you're going to do if it doesn't go to plan.
And Liam?
There is the great thing about this army is you can play different ways, and the only way you're going to find out your perfect style of playing is practicing. Is pretty much my bit of advice. I worked out quickly that I like aggressiveness. If I play defensively, I will probably fall asleep on the table. As Chris likes to say, if my game's not finished in 25 minutes, what's going wrong? So pretty much, tips wise is like if you pick your battles, like you like. Let's just say this right. If you're not buffing up your charges, 9-inch charges aren't as awesome or like as easy to get as you think. Even if we have a reroll, it's still a 9-inch charge. Like it's still like highly unlikely. So if you don't have that in your toolbox in your army list, then you might need to change your game plan to go aggressive. If that makes sense. Like if you want to go aggressive, get the tools for that list. If that makes sense. Like it's all fun and games putting 21 Kurnoth Hunters for Scythes, but if you have nothing to buff up the charges, like what's the point?
Yeah,
that's my thing. Like when you're writing a list, if there's something that you want to do, make sure you have the tools to do what you want to do. That's
life lesson for every Warhammer player, and maybe professional as well. Getting the job that you need is the tools that you need to build.
It's almost like I've been hanging out with you for too long now, getting all these business things in my mind. But yeah,
I guess it's with any synergy, you have to think about how many components there are to that synergy and how reliable each component is. The more you start adding on and the more aspects of unreliability you start adding on, the more risky it becomes, and therefore the more likely it's not going to work, and then it's going to backfire. So you have to think, okay, if my strategy is around I take this unit, this buff goes onto it, this happens, this happens, this happens, you need to go, okay, have I put enough into the rest of my list to make sure that that spell guaranteed happens? Cool. I've got the gem. I can guarantee that spell happens. I need this character to be alive, this CP. Okay, I can do this thing where I put them in a wildwood surrounded, they can't be seen. Fine. Do I have and you just have to go each step of what you're trying to achieve. How reliable is that? If you need to make a 9-inch charge and you don't have a hero nearby and you've got no buffs to charge, probably wouldn't rely on that strategy because it's not going to happen more times than it's going to fail. So yeah, you need to put in those redundancies, and the casting of Swarm for +3 to charge. That in itself, you can't just say, okay, I've got Swarm, so I've got the charges. No, you need the spell cast. So you have to think about the reliability of the cast itself. So then there's all of those, and then even then it's on a 2-up. So if your strategy revolves around, I have that down turn 1 and it works. If you roll a 1 turn 1, not great. So the best thing is to decide how you want to play, come up with your strategy, and make that strategy as reliable as you can within the confines of the 2K list.
Yeah, like for example, let's talk about the charge thing. If we really want to make that charge and you don't want to think about all those things, like you just want to do the most simplistic thing, then maybe you should not be running a glaive or whatever we're calling it now. Just go to no glaive and put down War Singer. Like you just know you got +2 to charge. Like that's the thing. So like stuff like that, you have to start thinking like, what if I just cut out the whole middleman thing and just go straight to this? If that makes sense. Like that's pretty much it. And the great thing about this book is there's so many options to do that.
I think that's what's really interesting about the list is about the book. It's really hard to do all of that. Is that if you're looking to do something consistently in one area, you want Spite Swap up, right? That's one thing you want. But you also want to get Wildwoods down consistently and reliably too. You also want to do good damage output. Ideally, you want a bit of shooting as well. Like you want good movement. Like you've got all these things you're trying to do. And I think you can make a list which does one of them really well, but more than one it starts to struggle with. And I think that's, if you're a Sylvaneth player, that's what you really need to think about. What are you going to do consistently and what are you gambling on, basically?
Yeah.
I just want to pick out something that Chris mentioned as well that I think we could go deeper into, and that is the word redundancy. when I thought about building my Sylvaneth list, and I thought about that because my army is very Kurnoth heavy, and I only have 3 units of 5 Sprite Revs to kind of hold Battleline and objectives, I'm thinking I need to be able to summon Dryads. And, do I just rely on having one hero that can summon, or do I have 2 of those that should one get deleted, I've still got that redundancy, or I've got 2 characters and I can choose the best place to put those Dryads. So for something like that, and I'm sure there are many other scenarios, redundancy in this particular army to get that reliability is very valuable.
Agree.
Yeah.
Based on all of your experience, you guys have done very, very well in the competitive scene. What's some of those top tips that you'd give people that we haven't already explored yet, or what kind of comes to mind when it goes from going from like good to great? This is like going from 3-2 to maybe 4-1 in a tournament, or maybe even 5-0.
Laurie, you go.
Cheers. That's possible to pass there. So I think you have to keep your head through it. I guess this is the general point about Sylvaneth. General point about gaming, but I think it's one with Sylvaneth in particular that you're often always in the game. Like I've had bad first turns and bad second turns. Not often in terms of losing models, because as we said earlier on, double turns really a threat to you. But you've got the tools because of wildwoods, because of teleportations. You've got the tools to always drag your way back into it. So I think learning how to use the wildwoods and learning how to keep yourself in the game by doing that is a really useful thing to do. It's the most powerful thing that Sylvaneth have in terms of their uniqueness. Learn how to use them. Spend time learning how to use them, and don't give up on yourself. What a positive message to have. Don't give up on yourself, and don't give up on the game. There's always that chance that you'll get that wildwood off in the useful place. Teleport into it, make that charge, claim it. I've had games in the past where I was playing a chap called Owen at Angel Court, where I really ballsed up my first 2 turns, really ballsed them up, lost a lot of my army. But then I got a double, and because of teleportations, Dryads teleported across the board. I summoned up a wildwood, which I teleported into, claimed an objective, got the double turn, teleported away from that same wildwood, took another objective, and as a result of that, won the game. And it was pulling out of my arse, but the wildwoods let you do that. So learn them and stick with them.
Chris?
Yeah, I think that's really good points. Especially in terms of you can usually claw your way back. I mean, sometimes you'll just take too much of a beating and lose a key piece, and you can't. You have to know the point where, okay, I can't come back from this. But the armies surprisingly can put out quite a high bit of damage in a focused zone. If you've got range and you've got a mix of combat and things like that. I mean, to put it into context, me and Liam played a game, for example, where he was playing Flesh Eaters. Wasn't Gristlegore, fortunately, but it was still a very strong tournament army of Hollowmorn. And turn 1, I messed up with my deployment, and he took in with his general. He took out a unit of Kurnoth Hunters and Alariel before I had a turn, so I'd lost over 1,000 points effectively in my army without doing anything. And then I won that game with Drycha and 2 units of bows, and then literally just summon Dryads and Spites, and I just focused on, okay, the immediate threat here is the Ghoul King. I can take him down in a turn, and then I can bog the horrors down with Dryads, minuses to hit, and then just engage them on the end because he had them strung out, and then summon Dryads more for the next turn, charge him with 10. Horrors actually don't have a great armor save. Got the double turn, so he didn't have the chance in between to heal. Had set up Woods to teleport and take his objectives, and you end up just doing that chip. And actually, that's fighting your way back from 1,000 points down before you've had a turn to winning a game, which we were both surprised about. But actually, when I added it up, the Drycha damage and all the chip damage can actually just rack up. So yeah, it's being aware of what you can do, and always, whenever I play, I'm always eyeing up the board for spaces for wildwoods. In terms of going 2-3 turns ahead, potentially going, okay, if he moves over here, I can put a wildwood there, and then I know I can launch pad from this one over to there, grab it, and then with tree revs as well now and hive, we can do that more than we ever could because of the guaranteed teleport anywhere on the board. and with +3 to charge, rerollable charge, and 6-inch pile-in from tree revs, they're really good. Quite a lot of the groves can make tree revs really choppy as well, actually, with extra attacks or rerolls to hit Harvest Boon, for example. Tree revs, I think, will do a lot of work, or a double piling in unit of tree revs in Winterleaf would be amazing because they pile in 6 inches every time as well. So, Laurie, where you mentioned before with Dryads trying to swing around, if you can do 2 6-inch pile-ins with tree revs, you can really get far across a board and take objectives and outnumber. And they're choppy. For their points, they're surprisingly choppy. I think if you get 10 into people with an extra attack and some rerolls, you'll surprise people with how much they kill. So yeah, I think it's just always being aware of what your army can do in a turn in terms of damage output and positioning, and always just trying to mitigate what happens if something goes wrong. Yeah,
That's a pretty awesome advice. Laurie?
Well, I've given my advice.
Oh, sorry. Chris has just mesmerized me so much.
Yeah,
I'm like
stared into his eyes and
just so beautiful. Liam, bring us home now.
What are my top tips?
Yeah, like what are your top tips with the army?
run forward.
And in particular, I know yourself and Chris have a very different play style. You know, Chris is I don't want to say Chris really thinks about each and every decision, very much like a scalpel.
Oh. No, trust me, he does.
Chris is a scalpel type player. You are a sledgehammer, and I know there are some people who are very interested in a very aggressive Sylvaneth list, and we'd be very, very interested to know how, whether it's through Dreadwood, whether it's through Heartwood, whether it's just generally, how do you play this army more in that style that might not be as common as the Chris and Laurie approach.
It's funny you say that, because the list that I'm currently thinking at, it isn't move forward exactly. It's very like even though the other day I did play move forward, but looking back at it, I can play it quite defensive plus aggro, but at the same time defensive, if that makes sense. So if
I'm not saying that you can't. I'm saying that you enjoy aggressive style. I do
enjoy aggressive style, but if you're gonna do that, buff up your charges and buff up your movement. That's my tip. And then and you probably have heard me say this when we play and stuff. I think about numbers statistically of what's the chances of this happening. If I measure stuff, I'm like, oh, if it's an 8-inch charge, it's gonna happen 60% of the time, or maybe not, kind of thing. So I literally think numbers wise, it's might shock you, but I do think numbers wise. And I always go for whatever's the highest chance thing. But currently with this army, the way I play it is you play aggro defensive. So you place your Wildwood aggressively, but you place your units there defensively, if that makes sense. So you put Kurnoth Hunters in cover, right? Or you place whatever in cover, and then you're aggressively placed, but you're going defensively in a way where it's going to be a nuisance to your opponent. Because if you tell your opponent it's a 3 at rerolling save, they're not going to have a great time, because they're not going to hit you as hard, and you're just going to hit them harder, if that makes sense. Also, know your threat ranges. I cannot emphasize that when it comes to playing in Age of Sigmar, for everything. Ask your opponent what is their threat range and if it's going to affect you, and then see if you can out threat range them, if that makes sense. So we have a 35-inch threat range Kurnoth Hunters if they're set up with bows on the field. And let's say their spellcasting threat range is only 18 inches. So you can literally stay out of range, or stay out of whatever range of their movement stuff, and then just attack them and they can't hit you back, if that makes sense. And we're probably one of the only few armies that can do that, if that makes sense. We are very much can out threat range people better than they can to us. So and use your Wildwoods in all your best advantage. It's line of sight blocking. So if you're going up against shooting, use it. Freaking abuse it, pretty much. Abuse this is really crappy to say, but whatever rules we have, abuse the crap out of them. Take them full on your advantage, because then you're not using the full allegiance abilities. We have them for free. These rules are for free. Our point costs are in it. So use and abuse it. Your opponent, your mates are going to hate you. Some of them probably won't even play you again, but you're doing well.
I think it is worth noting on that. I'm not going to go quite as extreme as Liam did there, but I do think it is our allegiance ability. At times, I think you have to be a bit pushy about the Wildwoods. People will get annoyed, as Liam says. they are your allegiance ability. You wouldn't turn up to a Zinch player and go, "I don't really like Destiny dice. Do you mind just not using them?" Actually,
Yeah.
That's that. I wish I could say that, and people would say, "Yeah," but it is our allegiance abilities. As you say, we pay the points for them. So if your opponent is there, kind of maneuvering terrain around, so you're not going to get any down, I would push back and go, "No, actually, no. I've got to be able to go. I don't want to take the piss. I don't want to get down 4 wildwoods across the whole table and take it all up, but I want to be able to get down some wildwoods. Like that's not unreasonable for me to want that." It is a bit of a tough one of the book, but I think you've got to push about it. You've got to say, "No, look, this is part of how my army works. I need them."
Yeah,
Put your
like,
foot down.
Yeah.
Like I can't emphasize that like you just have to use and abuse it. Like shooting is going to come back in 6 months. Like I can see it already happening because of this like whole like activation war thing. So shooting's coming back, and guess who's going to be ahead of everyone else? We are, because we're going to block line of sight. And also, one thing to emphasize as well is use the mystery table, because if you get overgrown, you are cheering. You are like, yes, this is like extending it. So pretty much use and abuse this game system is my way of saying it.
The one thing I would say to remember actually on some little changes based on the line of sight blocking is a few of our spells actually need line of sight now.
Yeah.
So Verdurous Harmony is one of them, for example. So if you want to regrow Kurnoths and they're sitting in a wood, you actually need to be able to see them. And most of our casters, other than Alariel, don't fly. So you need to be either have those Kurnoths not in a wood and have direct line of sight, or you need to be sitting the character that's got it within one of them so that they can actually see to cast that spell on them. Whereas before, all of our spells were just AoE. You didn't need visibility. So that is something to be aware of if you are a Sylvaneth player that was playing before. There is that small distinction, but it actually does have a big impact. And the wildwood placement, the new woods, as Laurie said, like it's very important to be able to place them. And the new woods, actually, you can use multiple kits to use different size pieces of the curves and make very different varying shapes or sizes of wildwood. If you use 3 of the really small pieces, for example, you can fit wildwoods in really small spaces, and you'll have a less reliable space to use because it's smaller, but you also get a wood there. So it's all about knowing if you've got a few of those kits, you can make longer ones, you can make thinner ones, more rounded ones, but you just need to make sure they're always pointing inwards. And then as long as all the tips are touching, then they're fine.
Guys, this has been awesome. It's been incredible. This has been almost 3.5 hours of absolute knowledge bombs from Chris Welfare, Laurie Huggett-Wilde, Dan AOS Shorts, and Liam Shadowhammer Burnett-Blue. Guys, thank you very much for being both on AOS Coach and Mortally Wounded podcast. Guys, if they want to chat to you, I've left your Twitter handles in the comment section below, or the channel description. But for those people who may not know it, Liam, where can they find you on the internets?
Shadowhammer _ on Twitter. Feel free. I already have had people message me about lists and stuff, so keep going. Keep sending me lists and stuff. I can give you some advice on that. And also the Warhammer Age of Sigmar Sydney page. I'm still there. And also I'm on the Age of Sigmar Sylvaneth page as well. I think the OG one. But yeah. That's
Laurie?
LHWAOS on Twitter.
And finally, Chris, this will sound very funny on your podcast, but for the people on YouTube or on my channel, where can they find you?
You can find me at Wounded Mortally on Twitter. Or I'm also hanging out in the main Sylvaneth WhatsApp group along with Laurie.
That's true.
We're always chatting and throwing out ideas, chatting to loads of tree bros. So it's a good chat if you want to join in there.
And
I didn't say much.
And for the benefits of people listening to this on the Mortally Wounded podcast, I am Anthony, AOS Coach, sitting on at Anthony Magro on Twitter or YouTube. You can find AOS Coach, and you'll find all great faction focuses like this and many more, as well as a whole bunch of cool stuff that we do. So, guys, this has been awesome. Lots and lots of knowledge. I'm really excited again to pick up my Sylvaneth. If 3 people get killed in the cities of Sigmar and they keep OPing my stuff, I will be back, and my list is ready to go, and my stuff is built, and you guys have lit the fire up my butt. So, guys, thank you. I'm excited. Lots of fun. Have a great rest of your week, and let's keep kicking ass and get rooted.
You.
Cheers.
Bye.
Peace.